Okay, calm down. You got nervous, man. You got nervous, man. Okay, calm down.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Katie Halper Show. We are so excited to be here with you. We have a great show for you today. We have a tripartite show. We have 3 different segments, and they're all great in different ways, and you're going to love it. Before we start, though, I do want to urge everyone to give the show a thumbs up. That's just a free way for you to support this show. Give it a thumbs up. That helps the algorithm so we can beat places like Pod Save America and all the other places that we are competitive with. And also, please do subscribe. And to do that, you hit subscribe and then the bell. That way you don't miss any of our streams. We are almost at 350,000 subscribers, which is so exciting. That is so great. So honored about that. And of course, please support the show at patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Again, that's patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. And if you can support the show for $1 a month, that's just $12 a year. You get to make the show happen because we couldn't do the show without you. We literally couldn't do the show without your Patreon support. And if you can afford $5 a month, you get bonus content, extended interviews. So, for instance, for this week, you get the full interview with Lt Col Daniel Davis. So give yourself that great gift if you can. Again, that's patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. So we're going to be speaking to Daniel Davis later on in the show. And we're going to also be speaking to 2 amazing doctors later on in the show, Drs. Feroze, Sidhwa, and Mark Perlmutter. But we also have 2 great guests that we're going to bring on right now to talk about Trump's illegal war on immigrants. And those guests are Murad Awawdeh, who is a strategist, organizer, and advocacy expert currently serving as the president and CEO at the New York Immigration Coalition. The son of Palestinian immigrants, Murad has dedicated over 2 decades of his life fighting for low-income communities of color across the state of New York. We're also bringing on Ron Kuby, a criminal defense and civil rights lawyer based in New York. So welcome to the show, Ron and Murad.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, it's a pleasure to be speaking to you. We are talking to you about immigration, especially what's happening in New York City, but that is also a window into what's happening nationally. So we're going to actually start off with a video that is a video that the New York Immigration Coalition obtained and then released. Can you tell us what this video shows?
Sure. What you're going to see is over 24 men who are being detained at 26 Federal Plaza, historically a building that's been used as an administrative building and where ICE continuously says is not a detention facility, but is being currently used as that. We received the video. We released it shortly after receiving it. And you see the person who is recording saying we've received little to no food. We have no contact with the outside world. The individual was held there for several days, and there were people there being held there for several weeks. And several times that we've taken congressional members to execute their congressional duties of oversight on detention facilities. They were told, this isn't a detention site. You have no authority here. And it's incredibly alarming that that's what they're doing. But the real issue in this moment is not that it's being used as solely as a detention site, which we know it is. But the real issue is that the people who are being detained there should not be detained to begin with. These are people who are following every single step of the way, following every letter of the law and filing for immigration relief. And when they're going to their court hearings, they're being tricked and trapped and then detained and disappeared by ICE.
Wow. Okay. So we're going to take a look at this video. And Ron, anything you want to add before we look at the video?
No, let's go to the video.
Okay, great. And also, how did you obtain, can you tell people how you obtained this? Obviously, the name has been withheld for obvious reasons, and there's a voice distorter, but what can you tell us about the person who gave it to you?
We received it through a community leader who's in contact with the person who is detained.
Okay, and they were able to sneak their phone in, right?
Yes.
Oh, you're not saying, is that not public? Okay.
Well, it looks like they were able to sneak their phone in.
Yeah, it was mentioned in an article, but I didn't realize. Yeah, okay.
Right.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was recorded by paranormal forces or something. But okay, let's take a look at the video.
Oh, mira, estoy volviendo aquí en el baño, un beta en el chingo mariconos. El sueño americano. Migración, 26 Federal Plaza. ¿Cómo nos tienen ver la situación como estamos nosotros, como perros acá? Pana, Ecuador.
Okay, so you know what's awful is I was talking about this with a friend, and things are so terrible, both in terms of the treatment of immigrants and what we're seeing in Gaza, that this almost like seems run of the mill. And then I had to kind of resensitize myself to the fact that no, this is not okay to have people lying down on Mylar blankets, to have people who are being detained illegally, to have, you know, members of the government lying, although that's kind of standard operating procedure. But tell us what is so significant about this, Ron.
The significance is this is the first time we've actually had a look inside the facility that the Trump administration was trying to keep everybody out of, and quite successfully. Congress, of course, members of Congress do have the right and indeed the duty to visit detention facilities. So what they did was to say, this is not a detention facility. We're just changing the name. It's you know, an administrative office, or it's an office, you can't come in. So this is the first look we've had as to the conditions which the Trump administration says are comfortable, are humane, and the like. And clearly untrue. But I agree with Murad that we're not just talking about trying to make sure that people in detention are well fed, well hydrated, and well rested before they get shipped off to some shipping container in Djibouti or South Sudan. We're talking about trying to stop this process and stop what's.
Oh, sorry, that was my dog, not yours. If there was.
Oh yeah, I thought that was my dog.
No,
That's
mine.
why I muted myself. All right. So, and 26 Federal Plaza is the central location where all of the immigrants who have sought immigration relief are required to periodically check in. So by definition, by showing up there, they are the folks who are following the law, doing everything that they need to do. And what ICE has done is station masked officers in the hallways who have a list, who do not have name tags. And when the government dismisses the proceeding and folks walk out thinking, oh, this is great, they're just snatched up and essentially disappeared. I don't want to overstate it. It's not Chile during the junta. They're not being, or Argentina, they're not being, you know, dropped out of helicopters into the ocean. But we don't know who took them. There's no individual accountability. We don't know where to find them, and their loved ones and others don't know how to locate them. So it fits within the international definition of a disappearance. Okay, it's not Gaza, but it is happening in the heart of New York City, one of the most progressive locations, you know, currently on planet Earth, except Ireland.
Right. So, why is that, Murad or Ron? Either of you can answer this. How is it that in this progressive city we're seeing this?
So I think what we're seeing and the dismay of it all is, yeah, part of it is because this is New York City. Part of it is because New York City and New York have been like, you know, the centers of immigration for centuries here. And immigrants have built every aspect of this city and this state, from our roads to our bridges, our skyscrapers, to the food that we eat, our local economies. The immigrant community here, documented and undocumented, contribute over $74.8 billion a year in local and state taxes. And I think the glaring part about this is that I do think, I want to go back to something you said of like, everything just seems like very desensitized and normalized. And the images we're seeing coming out of Gaza are incredibly horrific. And because people are constantly seeing the horrors of that, it sort of feels like, well, I've seen the bad already and it's, you know, okay. It's not okay. It's not normal We should not be normalizing this. And same thing when we're seeing these systems of justice that are meant to help people harm people. People are going to 26 Federal Plaza looking for justice and safety and are being faced with literal injustice. And how is this happening here? The Trump administration. This is part and parcel to their family separation and their mass deportation agenda. This is their one officer at one point said this is like helping them meet their quotas. And the Trump administration has put in a quota mechanism within the Department of Homeland Security. And it's not just DHS that's actually doing this work. They've deputized every single law enforcement agency across the country to support ICE in ICE enforcement. And now you add in the $170 billion that the Department of Homeland Security has gotten in the big ugly bill that was just recently passed and was also the largest wealth transfer in U.S. history, from taking away healthcare, food benefits, housing supports, and giving that money to the ultra wealthy for tax breaks. You also have this $170 billion that's going to allow ICE to expand further and supercharge their cruelty, because this is not about safety and security. It's literally just about cruelty, because that's their point. They want to put more fear, more chaos, and more panic in our communities to push for people further back into the shadows so they actually don't attain any status. And this is the problem that we're seeing right now. It's not like, Ron and I were on another show last week, I think it was, and he had a theory, and I encourage him to share it, but it's a federal building. 26 Federal Plaza is a federal building, but it happens to be in New York City. There are things that the city can do, and there's things that the federal government shouldn't be doing, and this is one of them. They should not be doing this to the people who are actually going there. And the vast majority of people who are being targeted for enforcement right now, if you look at the data, it's showing that they have no actual criminal infractions. And even if they did have a criminal infraction, they're entitled to due process.
Right.
And New York is a sanctuary city. And while legally that has shifting definitions, at least in New York City, what it means is nobody in the city of New York, no city employees, cooperate with ICE as part of their immigration agenda, their deportation agenda. And unfortunately, what we've seen due to a corrupt deal between the Trump Justice Department and our current mayor is they indeed are collaborating or cooperating. You can see it in the videotapes when demonstrations. You can see it when the two very high-ranking police officials, the day Donald Trump sent the National Guard into Los Angeles, they were golfing at his golf course in New Jersey, and they took selfies, which really sends a message to the police that go ahead. Yeah, it's against the law to cooperate with ICE. So we have a mayor who is allowing as much of this cooperation or illegality as he can. But under a different administration, there are things the city could do. We have health regulations. We have housing regulations. We have regulations about where people can sleep and how many of them can sleep in the same room. We can send in building inspectors. We can send in health inspectors. And if we reframed this a little bit and we viewed it as a hostage situation where people are being taken and disappeared. They're being kidnapped, or if you don't like kidnapped, abducted. Then we could at least try to use New York City's very formidable police power to lock that building down. Okay, maybe the NYPD can't go in legally and interfere with the operations because of the supremacy clause, but certainly they can prevent people from leaving into the city with their alleged deportees.
Right. So it's a question of, it's like a combination, right, of what's coming from the federal government or from the executive, from Trump, and then the way the Democrats here are enabling it.
Well, our mayor is no longer a Democrat. Happy to say. He's now an independent.
Right.
And he's running on the Stop Anti-Semitism independent ballot line. The Democrats in the city have actually done a very good job. The city council has fought very hard to maintain our sanctuary city status and has pushed back as much as they can.
Okay, great. Well, he has my vote now that I know he's running to stop anti-Semitism. I'm just kidding. And Murad, how much of a difference is there between what happened under Biden and what was happening under Trump? Because I feel like some people exaggerate how much of a departure it is, but also some people exaggerate how much the continuity it is. So where do you place this?
You know, I often say this is that, what we end up seeing is that both political parties don't want to actually fix our immigration system. But what does actually end up happening is that you hear the horrible rhetoric come from the right, and then you see the center actually implement those into policies. We saw that happen under President Obama when he was, rightfully coined the deportation and deporter in chief.
Right.
And at the same time, you saw him set up the systems for Trump 1.0 to actually do the harm that he did to our communities with family separation. Families were being detained under previous administrations, and Trump took that and actually blew that out of the water. And then the same thing happened when Biden came in, and he actually shut down the southern border. He actually created, these rocket dockets, and now Trump is actually using the same systems, but expanding them that other presidents have put in place for him. So when you think about like systems change, it's not that the Trump administration is actually creating systems change. They're actually utilizing the system and putting it into supercharged mode. And then, writing executive orders when they have to get things congressionally approved, which is what they tend to do, right? And then trying to ensure that they further build their wall that's useless, further harm more families, which is creating generational trauma moving forward and actually harming this country. Like, this nation can't move forward without this population, yet they continue to do everything that they can to harm it at the same time.
Yeah, that's a really important point. And speaking to that, I think that the Democrats fail on this issue because they don't have anything affirmative to say about immigrants or the undocumented immigrants, whether they're documented or undocumented. They're always kind of Republican light on this issue. They're trying to almost compete with the Republicans and out-hawk them on immigration. And so they don't say anything that actually would explain to people why these people aren't the enemy. So what kind of messaging, and not just messaging, but also policy, do you think the Democrats need to engage in so that people know that the enemy is not the person who is coming from a country which often was destabilized by our own government?
I don't think that this is solely a Democrat or solely a Republican issue. This is a national issue that both parties need to care about. And everyone needs to be invested in the success of this nation, right? We're still fighting for the promise of the nation that we've yet to achieve. And we can't do that by being exclusionary or by harming other people because, we want to advance a white supremacist and white nationalist agenda here. A lot of what we're seeing right now and the tactics that are being used are to, make America white again. And that's, it's not something that they want to say out loud, but that's what they're trying to do if you're looking at who they're targeting in this moment. I think the affirmative message here is not necessarily one of otherizing people. And that is the problem, is that you always need a villain. And right. It just so happens that every wave of immigrants that come in are that villain. The newest immigrant is the villain, right? We saw that happen with the Irish, the Italians, and it continues to this day. And just a quick note on, documented versus undocumented. Under this administration, they have already stripped legal status from over 1.5 million people and continue to strip status from people. So your status isn't going to save you.
Right.
And we're seeing green card holders getting rejected at ports of entry, coming back home, right, from vacation. We saw the Canadian national who's lived in the U.S. for over 38, 40 years get rejected from coming in. We're seeing a father right now in San Francisco, a green card holder, detained for the past 8 days. So status isn't going to help us in this moment. What we have to do is fight for actually keeping our families together, keeping this nation actually thriving in a way where everyone who calls it home has the ability not just to survive, but to thrive. And we can't do that if we have people who aren't willing to actually go to the mat and fix the issues that we're seeing. And we've said it for, through over 3 decades, the immigration system in this nation is broken.
Right.
That needs to get fixed. And I think that's where we have to start, as opposed to just constantly pointing the finger at the one-off bad story that people find.
Right. Yeah. What about you? What do you think, Ron?
Well, I think everything Murad said is correct. I think, though, the American people don't care. They don't see themselves as subject to being disappeared. They don't pay close attention to the economics of immigration and the way immigration actually maintains this country. They will notice when their tomato prices go up, I suppose, and when their Social Security accounts start to run dry, because of course immigrants who are here who don't have status are working illegally under false Social Security numbers,
right.
but they're paying Social Security. Right. Those are the folks that are going to make sure that when I retire, I get my full benefits. But most of the American people fully accept the cruelty, the anger, the bitterness, the white supremacy of this administration. And even if they don't like it, even if they, and a lot of opinion polls say people disagree with the way Trump is handling immigration. Right. But, they disagree with it the way they disagree with static cling. Okay, it's unpleasant. I'd rather not have it done this way, but it's not really going to interfere with my life.
Right. But I guess that's what I was referring to. I mean, the people who, and I say Democrats because Republicans traditionally, although, they're strange bedfellows, and you can have people who are, good, quote unquote, good on this issue for different reasons. But I guess my point is that Democrats' response to Republicans seems to be trying to tack to the right and then failing to make anyone happy because they're not going to be harsh enough for the right, and they're not going to provide anything meaningful and positive for people who don't want to see immigrants harmed. And they don't do what you just did, Ron, which is kind of lay out the way that regular people in this country, not the corporations necessarily or the elites, but people benefit from having people from other countries here, whether it's financially, economically, culturally. I don't know why that's never communicated by our politicians. Anyway.
Well, you summed it up quite nicely. I don't know that I have the answer to that.
I do want to note that the last time we had any meaningful, real change that was good on immigration was under the radical, leftist, socialist, communist President Ronald Reagan in 1986 or 87. So yeah. I also want to flag that's when the last time we had real immigration change, which provided over 2 million people the opportunity to adjust their status. And since then, we've seen no real change and actually harm get created starting under Bill Clinton in 94 and 96.
But lest we be defending President Reagan, let me just note that while he was doing good work on immigration, he was busy subverting, destabilizing.
Oh, absolutely.
Honduras and Guatemala, El Salvador, and Nicaragua, and many of the immigrants today are fleeing from the mess that the United States foreign policy made in those countries.
Yeah, and the foreign policy issue is another piece of this, right? We wouldn't have people seeking safety and security here if we weren't messing up their countries with our foreign policies, right? Like, why did we have so many Venezuelans seeking safety in the United States? Because our sanctions killed the country. So I think there's always a cause and a reaction, and we tend to not pay attention to the cause, but look at the reaction as opposed to addressing the root cause of the issue, which is U.S. foreign policy in most cases.
Right. Well, speaking of foreign policy, I think that, Murad, you are Palestinian American. And during the election, the presidential election, I felt like a lot of people on the left kind of presented a choice between, like a Sophie's choice between Biden, who was overseeing a genocide, but maybe not quite as bad on the issue of immigration, and Trump, who was really bad on immigration, but hadn't as of yet, now he has, overseen a genocide. But what we actually wound up seeing when Trump became president was the intersection of those two issues, right? Because so many of the people who have been seized, deported, disappeared have been, that has happened to them because they are either Palestinian or because they are daring to, defend the rights, the human rights of Palestinians. So can you talk about this intersection? And was this something that you had predicted?
No. Not something I could have predicted in the sense of the cross between Palestinian identity and immigration coming to a head, even though, there was some trolls and doxing organizations that were, saying that they were going to do this. But
not to brag, but I'm on the betar list. So apparently I can't go into Israel. But then again, I'm
dear.
I know. Where am I gonna spring break? Yeah, right. Yeah.
I don't know. But I do think that the piece here is the same question that has come up since, this all started. Where does human rights live? Does every single person on this world who lives in it has rights as an individual, as a person to live? And I think that's the question that we have to answer. And the question is not getting answered. And if anything, since the election to today, what we've seen is things get incredibly worse in Palestine and specifically in Gaza, where there is an actual living genocide happening and where forced man-made starvation is killing people. Yes, some aid trucks are being let in now, but it's far under the amount that needs to get in. And you also are seeing the connections between people who were pro-Palestinian protesters here in the United States being targeted for their activism, which is protected under free speech, right? So it's sort of like what laws count for who and who has rights to them. And I've said this often, even when it comes to due process, that either all of us have rights or none of us do. Because if some of us do and some of us don't, that means none of us do, because we may or may not be the hot topic of the month. Someone else is going to be up for losing their rights down the road. So I think the bigger piece here is chaos and confusion and panic is being man-made in this moment here and abroad. And what we need to do is fight against the inhumanity that we're seeing, because we're all getting normalized to the images that are coming out of, Gaza, but we're also being normalized by seeing kids fighting for their parents being taken away from them in a courthouse. That is not normal. We have to call it out for what it is too.
And just to clarify, when I said that at the beginning, how I found myself almost numb to this, my point wasn't that this is okay. My point is that it's such an indictment of the world that we live. I know. Yeah.
That's right. You see these images day after day after day. You read about the flurry of lawsuits and various court rulings, and you tend to become desensitized, or at least doom scroll down the New York Times headlines on your app, and land in Wordle or Spelling Bee or something that's less draconian.
And Ron, what do you want to add to this in terms of what Trump is doing legally, and what is the legal strategy that lawyers like you are using to defend the rights of people?
Well, primarily the criminal defense work I do these days is representing demonstrators and other people who are being excessively charged, excessively punished, and treated very harshly because of their stance against ICE, and more particularly their stance in favor of Palestine, whether they be college students or people on the street. That's primarily the work that I'm doing around those issues. During the first Trump administration, we would work to take people who had old criminal records. They pled guilty to marijuana possession in Madison, Wisconsin in 1972. And now they're fully established adults. They have American citizen children and credits to their community and all of that. And they were facing deportation. In some of those cases, we were able to get those old criminal convictions withdrawn, so they wouldn't face deportation. But now it's all moving so fast, so quickly. There's just no time to get into court and to do those things. Meantime, the Trump administration has now sued the city of New York and the head of the city speaker's city council, trying to force the city employees into carrying out an ICE agenda, basically to commandeer them to enforce federal immigration law. Even though in 1997, the Supreme Court said very clearly, with a conservative majority, you can't do that. You cannot commandeer state or local officials and make them enforce federal law. It was reaffirmed in 2018, again by a conservative majority, but it's part of, Trump's using the incredible power and wealth and inexhaustible supply of lawyers that the government has to go after his political enemies and carry out this type of agenda.
Well, you guys have been so generous with your time, and we have some more wonderful guests to bring on. But any final words that you want to offer? And my final question to you is, what can people do? What can people who care about the treatment of people who happen to have been born? I mean, so much of this comes down to where you're born. I keep thinking with Palestine, it's like the crime of these children who are seeing, being blown into bits, or the crime of this woman who we're seeing miscarry, the crime of this man being tortured, the crime of this grandfather starving to death is literally that they were born in Gaza. I mean, that's their crime, right? And the crime of these people who are in that place, Federal Plaza, their crime is being born in the wrong country. So for those of us who care about people, despite where they're born, what can we do to protect people and be in solidarity with them?
I think first and foremost, the first thing people should do is figure out what their, however much privilege that they have, how they can use that. And some people who are U.S. citizens have a lot more rights than people who aren't. Right. So really being able to step up and start joining the fight back, which could be showing up to protest, supporting organizations doing the work on the ground, escorting their neighbors to immigration court and trying to help them get out of it. I think that there is several different ways, but the easiest way that people can take action is actually joining our action alert, which is texting the letters NYIC to the number 52886. And that'll get you signed on to our rapid response network, but also making sure that people are actually doing what they can to step up, because the way in which this administration will get us away from, we're not slipping into a constitutional crisis. I believe we're already in one. And moving further away from a democracy into an authoritarian regime, the only way we can fight back against that is actually fighting for the democracy that we currently have and making it better.
Sorry, that was, you text NYIC to what number?
52886.
52886. We will add that to the description, but I'm just putting in the chat right now. That's weird. They think I'm spam. It's my own show. Brad, can you put that in? NYIC, text NYIC to 52886.
Of course, I'm representing a young man who, shortly after the National Guard was sent into Los Angeles, he was allegedly so angered by the way that was being done, the way ICE was acting, and the way the New York City Police Department was collaborating with ICE, that he allegedly torched 10 police cars in their parking lot at night using hay as an accelerant, totally organic, and using those little fire starters like wax and dryer lint that you get in. Wow. Trying not to use any fossil fuels in the making of that particular arson. Not advocating that, of course. I'm an officer of the court.
Right.
Just noting that that's what he did as his form of protest, allegedly.
Wow. Yeah. Right. Wow. Well, that's not what I don't think people you're suggesting that people do, but that is an interesting anecdote. I just don't want to get this channel removed from YouTube. Okay. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on, and don't think that's why I'm ending it. That everyone saw that was I did say it's my last time. And
as soon as we start talking about arsonating,
exactly,
stars, old Katie Bales.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for coming, and we would love to have you back, and we'll definitely put that alert in there. And this is, one of the great things about this issue is that it's something you can do locally, and you really can have a concrete effect on it. So I'm going to get involved in this. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for coming on.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Well, that was a great discussion, and we have another great discussion coming down the pike, which is what we do, because we have these wonderful guests on the show. Let me see how we're doing in terms of Uh, whoop. All right, let's see. Oh, we're doing pretty good with likes. If you haven't liked the show, please do like the show. We're going to keep it going. We are going to bring on two doctors who we've had the honor of speaking to before. They have spent a lot of time in Gaza. They are Dr. Feroze Sidhwa and Dr. Mark Perlmutter. Dr. Feroze Sidhwa is a general trauma and critical care surgeon from California. As a humanitarian surgeon, Dr. Sidhwa has worked in Palestine, Ukraine, Haiti, Zimbabwe, and Burkina Faso. He has written and spoken about his surgical humanitarian work, the United States' role in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and the political consequences of medical relief work. His op-eds have appeared in several major media outlets, including the New York Times. We won't hold that against you. Just kidding. And Dr. Perlmutter is a Jewish orthopedic and hand surgeon from North Carolina. He has worked in conflict zones around the world for decades. So welcome, Dr. Sidhwa and Dr. Perlmutter. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
Yes. And also thank you so much for all of your work. It's really extraordinary. I mean, I'm so in awe of the doctors who are from Gaza, and I'm in awe of the doctors who choose to go to Gaza, who don't live there. But of course, the doctors who stay there and continue to practice are heroes. Before we start talking about what's happening in Gaza right now, I want to know what brought each of you to this area, to the area of Gaza to practice medicine in the first place.
Mark, go for it.
Largely my humiliation of how Israel, a country that we give $10 million to $20 million a day to, $300 billion, how we fund a country that I supposedly share a heritage with, which is a separate discussion I can discount, with my even immensely more embarrassment that my country is actually funding the death of children, directly funding it, not indirectly, but is 100% responsible for the maceration, for the shredding, for the burning, for the starvation of children, when it can be 100% avoided just by following our own laws.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's persuasive. Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, for me, it's really the same. I mean, I'm not Jewish. My family's from a small ethnic and religious minority in Pakistan. I don't have any ethnic or religious connection to the conflict, but no, for me, it's the same thing. You know, I still remember when I was jaw thrusting a little girl, like a 5-year-old girl, just to keep her breathing properly.
Sorry, can you explain? I don't know what that means.
Just like pulling her jaw forward so she can breathe properly because she had a brain injury. And, you know, there was just a little trickle of blood coming out of the left side of her cheek at the time. And I just remember, you know, the nurses were getting some stuff set up so we could take care of her properly. So I was just holding in that position. And, you know, I just remember thinking, like, did I pay for the shrapnel in this little girl's head, or did my neighbor, or did my other neighbor, did Mark, did Katie, you know, who paid for this? It's one of us. We don't know who, but we all did. So, yeah, so that's honestly what motivates me to go back. That and wanting to stand in some solidarity with my colleagues there, provide them some protection. Yeah, that's about it, honestly.
Wow. Well, I wanted to ask you both, because you've been to Gaza. How many times have you been?
We've both been twice.
Okay, twice. So, you know, there's this new kind of narrative, and it's a, you know, double-edged sword, or it's bittersweet. You're finally seeing people who seem to get finally that what Israel is doing is wrong and bad. And even some people saying it's a genocide who didn't see that before. And morality aside, because I think a lot of people understandably are like, where were you before? But you do see a narrative that they just started starving people, like just now, this week. But can you correct that narrative? And especially given that you were there in person?
Sure. Starvation was there even before October 7th. And I'll leave Feroze to address that. It was one of the poorest, most impoverished countries on the face of the earth. It met every World Health Organization criteria for an impoverished country. It paralleled that of the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Haiti in terms of food availability. On October 6th, after that, food has been, by design, deliberately restricted, as has medical aid. let's make no mistake about it. When starvation and mass famine becomes to the forefront of the legacy media, that doesn't mean that it wasn't present for 2 years prior to then, because part of the mechanism of covering up is first to not allow journalists into the country or kill the ones that are denizen journalists. Not allow competing journalists in your own country. Al Jazeera, for example, was kicked out of Israel. Arresting your own Israeli journalists, imprisoning those, threatening those who argue against the Netanyahu regime inside of Israel. And that serves to cover up a lot of the atrocities that have been going on, which is why Feroze and I started speaking out in the first place, is because there were no journalists there to tell the truth. We had to wear that hat in order to be a good physician, to prevent the disease from spreading, to cut out the cancer of Zionism. We had to become journalists. It's not what we normally do.
Yeah, wow. Cut out the cancer of Zionism. That's a very powerful medical metaphor. And we're definitely going to return to that theme because I think it's really important. But yeah, that's interesting. I mean, you're forced to be the voice. I mean, obviously there are Palestinians who are voicing their stories, but they're getting killed or they're getting muzzled or they're getting threatened.
Or more importantly, the legacy American media, if something comes out of the IDF or from the Knesset, it's automatically labeled as truth.
Right,
it's beyond reproach. No matter how much of a bullshit story it is, it's beyond reproach. Netanyahu today says there's no such thing as a famine in Gaza. The same day that B'Tselem, the largest human rights organization in Israel, says it's a genocide that's taking place. They finally acknowledged it. The same day Netanyahu says there's not even any starvation, and to which Trump, to his credit, and it nauseates me to have to give Trump credit for things, actually rebuffed Netanyahu on that. Of course, that's widely known. But when Trump acknowledges that the death of innocent children is substantial enough to reproach Netanyahu, then the legacy media is far behind the curve in reporting the truth. Far behind.
Right.
They commit journalistic malpractice every day they go on air.
Right. And we've had on this show the great human rights lawyer Craig McIver, who actually wrote a piece about how he hopes that the media can be held complicit, that there's a precedent for holding media accountable for their enabling of genocide. And you know what the New York Times likes doing is they like to act as the stenographer for Israel, and then a couple weeks later, after everyone has ingested and bought into this brainwashing, then they correct the record, and by then everyone's already internalized it. If they ever do it,
never on the first page. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
If they ever do it, or they might do it they might do it online, but not in the print.
Right. Or when they finally wrote about the rapes of Palestinians, it was very far down in the article. So they had that article, that famous article, Screams Without Words, that had no evidence. But when they actually have documented evidence of rape, which is so undeniable that Israeli media covers it, they will hide it. Either not cover it at all. If they're covered at all, it's paragraphs down. Yeah.
Katie, sorry, just to finish off the thought though on starvation, you mentioned and Mark mentioned too that it didn't start on October 7th. You know, back in 2007, Israel imposed a land, air, and sea blockade on Gaza, and just a year later, Mary Robinson, she was the president of Ireland at the time, or actually, I think she was done being the president of Ireland, but she was one of those international respected statespeople, along with Jimmy Carter and people like that. As she went to Gaza, and when she came out, this is just a year after the blockade in 2008, a long time ago, she said their whole civilization has been destroyed. I'm not exaggerating. It's unbelievable that the world doesn't care while this is happening. So that's just after 1 year of the blockade. Later that year in December, Israel starts Operation Cast Lead. And if anybody reads the Goldstone Commission report, the UN's fact-finding mission on it, a good chunk of it, maybe like, I don't know, 10, 15% of it is actually taken up with Israel's days-long destruction of a chicken farm. There's no fighting going on. They have complete and total control of the area. And the Israelis just decide to destroy this chicken farm, just bulldoze chicken coops, bulldoze the chicks underneath it, just destroy the whole place. And they it's just one example, but there's several others, including factories, bakeries, etc. But what they conclude in their, or part of their conclusion, is that the Operation Cast Lead was designed to deprive Gazans the ability to provide to themselves the necessities of life. And then in 2014, Israel attacked Gaza every 2 years, but in 2014, there's another major attack, Operation Protective Edge. After that, Sarah Roy, who's definitely the world's leading expert on the Gaza Strip, she writes in the introduction
She's an
to
economist,
the book, she's a political economist and other things. Yeah.
And her parents happen to be survivors of the
She's
Holocaust.
the daughter of Holocaust survivors. She's at the Harvard Center for Middle East Studies. She's an absolutely brilliant and remarkably decent human being. But she writes that the 2014 Operation Protective Edge has dealt something of a death blow to Gaza's economy. Well, what does that mean? I mean, Gaza's economy was only furniture building, agriculture, and fishing. Well, okay, that means those things aren't happening anymore. Since 2014, 80% of Gaza has been dependent on humanitarian aid just for food. 80%. I mean, that's pretty remarkable. So yeah, so exactly like Mark said, the starvation did not start, or I should say the hunger did not start on October 7th. And, you can even go back to like 2004 or 5 when Dov Weissglass said that we're going to put the Palestinians on a diet. The idea will be that he said it'll be like an appointment with a dietitian. They'll get thinner, but they won't die. And this is back in 2004 or something. I can't remember. There was a Haaretz article by somebody that reported it. This has been the standard operating procedure that the U.S. and Israel have been imposing on Gaza since the Second Intifada, basically.
So awful. What was the difference between the first and the second time that you went to Gaza? Like, what was the change that you saw?
The first time we went there, knowing that we were going into the middle of a war, and we anticipated operating on mass casualties. And we've both seen mass casualties before. We know how consuming that can be to a medical system, how consuming it can be to an individual doctor or a society of doctors, and to a society. And so we went prepared for that. I took 700 pounds of metal implants, anticipating them to last me the whole time. They, in fact, lasted 1 week. And something I've mentioned before on air, I think it was on your show, that I haven't put in 700 pounds of implants to this day in my greater than 35 years of doing orthopedic surgery. And I put implants in 3 days a week. And have done so tens of thousands of surgeries, and I'm not even close to 700 pounds of metal implants. They're titanium, they're lightweight, they weigh as much as a yellow pencil to fix a broken arm, and 700 pounds was an immense amount of implants. They were gone in 1 week. And so the second time we went, there was a ceasefire. We were fully anticipating doing reconstructive surgery, meaning surgery that fixes a chronically cut nerve, a chronically torn tendon, a chronic fracture that never healed or healed very crooked, at least from an orthopedic point of view. Feroze was anticipating, I'm sure, that type of surgery as well, people with chronic disease. Shortly after we got there, the ceasefire broke. We were at different hospitals. And it broke, and other people have described it perfectly in that all of Gaza shook. There probably wasn't a square mile of Gaza that wasn't bombed at 2:30 in the morning. And in my small hospital, I was in the smallest of the hospitals. Before the war, it was the smallest, most ill-equipped hospital. We at no time were there less than 70 people bleeding on the emergency room floor. 70 people at a time, hours long. And then after that, we took care of kids that were deliberately attacked by Apache helicopter gunships while they're riding their bicycles. Definitive 13-year-old kids shot by a helicopter that squared up against them and shredded their limbs. In fact, one girl we operated on collectively, when I went back to his hospital, I believe she ended up losing 3 of her 4 legs. And with the starvation, she's probably dead right now. With the infections that certainly set in. So the organized assassination of children is something that for us makes it hard to believe that anybody would have a difficult time understanding that there's a deliberate starvation going on. There's a minuscule line between someone who would deliberately starve somebody from the administrative level or from the military level, deliberately starve somebody when you just got done shooting their brother with a helicopter gunship and shredding them like paper or burning them like a hot dog left on the grill. They are the same personality. They are the same decision makers. They are the same zealots behind the trigger of their, their 5.56 rifles. They don't really care how they kill. They just want them dead so that they can possess their land. They don't care how they kill them. They just want them dead.
Right. And then you have people, I actually had a discussion with someone, an extended family member. Hi, if you're watching. I don't think he'll be mad at me for saying this, but about, how now is not the time to blame. Because I was like, we were fighting, we were having an exchange about whether or not Israel was a colonial project. And then she sent me a link to something that was about like what to do right now with some Israel organization. And I said, yeah, it's true. That is the priority right now is this. And, it was framed a little bit as like a humanitarian situation as opposed to, the intentional starvation policy. And I said something about how it's obviously Israel's fault, also the fault of the United States, not just because of the funding and the logistical support, but because of the global the Gaza Humanitarian Fund, that totally sinister organization, which is like worse than not providing aid. I mean, it's luring people to their deaths. And Gabbard Mate, another survivor, has compared it to what the Nazis did to Jews, luring them out of concentration camps onto the luring them out of the ghettos, putting them onto the trains with the promise of food so that they could meet their deaths in camps. But she was like, well, yeah, but now's not the time to assign blame. We have to fix it. But we can't fix it. It can't be fixed unless it is acknowledged who's doing what. Like, everyone needs to be clear-eyed on the fact. Yeah, accountability. Like
there needs to be accountability.
Yeah, because right. Israel can't be the people. Israel cannot be the entity. That's actually that's an interesting question. It's like, Israel can't be trusted. So what is the solution right now? Like right now, and then we can talk about how the long-term effects of what's happening right now. But let's say you guys were president. What would you do right now? Or it doesn't, what could be done right now to save as many lives as possible? What kind of policies?
Well, it's Gaza, I fear, is not going to exist anymore because the United States doesn't have the moral aptitude to go against the interests of AIPAC. AIPAC owns our prostitutes that sit in the Capitol. They're all whores. They all take AIPAC money. They are, by the purest definition, a whore. They abort and abrogate their responsibilities to us, their oath to us, by responding to the money that's given to them only to reinsure their re-election. That defines a prostitute. Daryl Issa, in my opinion, is the typical example of a prostitute. He will do anything for AIPAC money, including ignore the death of children who I sent him pictures of dying and dead children while I was in Gaza to his cell phone, and he responded in a glib fashion. Knowing that children were dying that night, he refused to take an action. And he proudly boasts his AIPAC score of 100. They rate people on their loyalty to them. He admitted to me on the phone, I'm a proud 100% AIPAC loyalist. And it shows. His return on investment, seeing pictures of dead kids, was probably pretty high. That's what AIPAC's goal is.
Yeah, if I think we can all agree if we were president, these things wouldn't be happening, but not because we'd be president. Because if somebody like any of us were elected president, that would mean we actually have a democratic country. And that's I think that's an important point because Mark's 100% right. Not just AIPAC, but kind of the whole Israel lobby in general. But the Israel lobby couldn't do what it does, and the American political elite couldn't do what they do. Business interests, banking interests, arms manufacturers, all these people, if the country was actually run by the people who live in it, but it's not. And
Right.
that's kind of that's the root cause of not just this, but what you guys were just talking about before too. Why is the only seemingly effective protest that's available to somebody I forget the gentleman's name, but what he said at the
Ron
end,
Kuby.
setting 10 cars on fire.
Right.
Why is that? Why are people being driven to that in a country where the large majority of people don't want immigrants being treated the way they are, yet they're being treated that way? Why in a country where something like 80% of Americans don't want to send weapons to Israel, and for a variety of reasons, nobody thinks it's all for great reasons. But when that's the situation, when 80% don't want something happening, and not just some random thing, but the crime of crimes happening, why are we participating in it anyway? The simple, the fundamental problem is that we don't have a democratic society. We could have, a lot of people have died to try and get us that way. And we had, the things don't just automatically get better on their own. A lot of people have sacrificed a lot of things to get us some democratic rights. All three of us basically would have been barred from voting at the beginning of this country, and now we're not. But it's been backsliding, and it hasn't been. We haven't continued to fight for these things effectively, and we better start doing it because Gaza is not the only place in the world where people can be destroyed. It's in the spotlight right now, and I hate to say this, but I agree with Mark. I don't think there's actually any way to save Gaza, but if we don't continue doing what we're doing, if we don't impose a cost on our political representatives. And if we don't increase the political pressure on them to the point that they do stop what's going on or stop the next version of it, then, from Gaza, it's just going to go to the West Bank. That's pretty obvious. But, from the West Bank, it could vary. It's not hard to see, Israel's major importer or Israel's major trade partner when it comes to military hardware is India. If India starts importing this, not just this drone or this thing, but like the whole system that's being used to destroy human beings in Gaza, not just human beings, an entire society in Gaza, and starts waging war on its 250 million Muslims, like the Hindu fascist government there would very much like to, you're talking about an easy. Yeah, exactly. You're talking about a process that very easily leads to a nuclear war between India and Pakistan, and that destroys literally all human life. So these are not small things. This is not going to happen tomorrow, obviously, but these are not small things. If people want, either people get control of our future, or there may not be a future to control. It's really important.
Yeah. I don't even know if it's worth responding to this because I brought it up with you guys in chat, and Feroze, you said something about like don't take these disingenuous arguments too seriously, but just in case anyone believes this, you do have people on Twitter, and I assume that in the real world also, making the argument, like pointing to a photo of an emaciated child and a non-emaciated adult and saying either, you see, they're lying, that non-emaciated adult is clearly stealing the food and hoarding the food. That kid is only emaciated because they have some genetic disorder. You even had a Zionist writer, novelist, say something about how don't blame. It's like something disgusting. He deleted it, but a bunch of us screenshot it because he should be held to account and apologize. And this should haunt him forever. He tweeted something about how Palestinians marrying their cousins isn't the fault of the Jews, suggesting that this is some kind of thing that these people brought upon themselves. And these are such heinous arguments, especially, not as a Jew, but it is pretty disgusting. And I'm not a Jewish supremacist. I don't think Jews are any better than any other group, but it's just ironic that to see people who champion Israel. What did you say?
When your argument is weak, when you have no foundation to base and reject the criticism that's coming at you, it's easy to hit low-hanging fruit or even fabricate low-hanging fruit to distract. Talking about consanguineous marriages is bullshit. We've been there. We've never seen it. There's not a more solid institution on the face of this earth than a Palestinian family, period.
Yeah, that's pretty true.
Even my extended Italian family, my extended Jewish half, does not have the familial loyalty, dedication, and service that I saw in every single Palestinian family. So that's just plain bullshit. The second point is when on the large scale you know that your country's assassinating children, when you know that you're starving them, it's easy to see a photograph and bastardize it. It could be a photograph of a healthy person who has means, who has money, because I was there almost 6 months ago now, when a can of tuna fish costs $90 and a liter of gas, a quart of gas, costs $150. They may not have cars, but that's the only way that they can cook because there's no natural gas available at all. The number one fuel supply previous to this, we would go down the street and people who could afford food were cooking falafels and pita bread because they only had lentils and flour at that time. A falafel was $3. The average income in Gaza was at that time 50 cents a day. So you'd have to work all week just for the iftar meal, the only meal of the day. And so there is some food available, but it's outwardly unaffordable. And I even have doctor friends I talk to daily there who have money, who tell me that they are starving because there just isn't food available where they're at. In the concentrations camp in the shore, there's no food available. I forget, Feroze will know, he knows everything about this, but I think there were 600 or 700 trucks a day that were needed on October 6th and the years before of supplies that come into Israel.
Yeah, I mean, 600 trucks a day is what it took to get to the starvation plus diet that Israel had the Gazans on since 2007.
And
when Dov Weissglass was making his insane statements.
There hasn't been 600.
Now,
yeah.
No, yeah, exactly. Now
there hasn't been
imagine
600 trucks in the last
water
3 months.
And now water also has to be trucked in. Virtually everything that a human being needs to survive has to be trucked in. Whereas before it was, there was a market, there was some level of commerce. No, it's just outrageous. I mean, do cousins marry each other in Gaza? Yeah. There's a reason Eastern European Jews get Tay-Sachs disease too. I mean, that's just a disgusting thing to say. If somebody, I almost feel like, and I don't want to make light of it, but I almost feel like that was an attempt by that person. Humor can be a defense mechanism. I feel like that was almost an attempt by that person to rationalize and ignore what was going on through some pretty sick attempt at humor.
And projection.
The idea that Palestinians are starving because Gazan cousins married each other is just that's an insult to stupidity. Gazans are starving because, as Benjamin Netanyahu very proudly announces all the time, they are not allowing anything to go into Gaza. I have to be honest, it's a little unusual to see. Anybody who knows what Gaza is, it's a territory, say on October 6th, it's a territory of 2.2 million people with a fence around it and a sea on the west, under siege, under blockade. If you don't, and a place where, like I mentioned already, the food production system has been destroyed repeatedly. So if you don't allow, and 80% of the population is already dependent on humanitarian aid. So even forget all the destruction, everything else. If you stop allowing food into this territory, what would any rational person expect to happen? And then on top of that, the other thing that constantly gets said, Katie, is oh, Hamas is stealing the aid, and they're it's really just Israeli propagandists that say this now, like people who just either are directly employed by the Israeli government or Alan Dershowitz, as far as I can tell. He seems to be the only person who's still willing to say it out loud. But they say that Hamas is stealing the aid and using it to fund their war machine. Well, okay, these homemade weapons don't need much funding, and there's not much of a war machine there. But leaving aside, if that were true, like Mark mentioned, the just astronaut, and I want people to know Mark is not exaggerating when he said a can of tuna cost $90. Right now, the UN has reported, and these are things are usually based on surveys of markets. Right now, 1 kilogram, about 2 pounds of flour, costs $100 which means it's totally unaffordable. Obviously, nobody can afford that, except if 20 families manage to scrounge 400 shekels together or 250 shekels together and go and fine, okay, yeah, they get 1 kilo of flour to share between 50 people or something. It's completely ridiculous. They won't die that day; they'll just die a few days later instead.
That's that's a slice of bread per person.
Yeah, at the most, but yeah, so it's just completely ridiculous to claim that this is happening for any reason other than the fact that the U.S. and Israel have blocked any aid and any commerce and anything from going into Gaza, have blocked Gazan fishermen from fishing in the sea, and have blocked Gazan farmers from farming in the east of Gaza. That's just I would love to hear somebody actually try to argue the point for more than 15 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, it's also just either such bad lying or such rank stupidity. I mean, I think what happens is it rots your brain. Like, people are kind of lobotomized by Zionism. So it's not, you don't have to have been a doctor or studied biology or anatomy that intensely to understand that adults have more calorie reserve, more fat reserves that they can live off of. That it's not illogical for a child to waste away more quickly than an adult. I mean, don't people know how hard it is? How many adults are constantly trying to lose weight and can't lose weight? And kids need to be fed constantly. I mean, it's just a no-brainer.
The caloric demand per pound on a child is significantly greater than it is in an adult.
Yeah. And I mean, it's almost like dumbfounded. I can't believe that I'm even saying this. I know people are probably like, why are you wasting your time on this? But who knows how many people are actually buy into this ridiculous. It's very stupid, but I'm so surprised by how dumb Zionism makes some people who are otherwise there's this term PEP, progressive except on Palestine, but there's also SEP, smart except on Palestine, where people who are usually rational beings become total brain dead zombies. So yeah,
I mean, you see it whenever somebody mentions Hamas, right? We bombed the hospital because of Hamas. You're like, okay, wait, but even if Hamas, they're not, no one has ever seen Hamas in the hospital. So even if they were, is the right answer to bomb the hospital?
Right.
That doesn't seem right. I mean, if that's true, wouldn't it also make sense for Hamas to bomb Israeli hospitals?
Right.
I mean, certainly there are Israeli soldiers in Israeli hospitals. Nobody accepts that. It's completely crazy.
Plus
and
when you say a violation of the Geneva Convention.
Yeah, of course it is. But when you say that to somebody, they say, oh yeah, I never actually thought about it. And you're like, yeah, thought. If you thought about it for 2 seconds, but again, you meet people where they are, and okay, fine. But yeah. But anyway, sorry, I didn't finish the thought before. But if the claim is that Hamas is funding its war machine through the deprivation of food to regular Gazans and then selling it at these hugely inflated prices, anybody who thinks about it for half a second can come up with the solution to this problem, which is to flood Gaza with aid. Then it won't cost anything. Right. If there's sacks of flour all over the place, why would you pay Hamas $100 for a kilo of flour? That's just dumb. If there was water all over the place, why? This is just silly. It's just transparently silly. The whole thing is absurd. And you kind of have to wonder about news anchor. I mean, I can understand a normal human being just listens to the news randomly. Okay, that's probably right. But when a news anchor is sitting there talking to this or that Israeli flunky, right, and they can't think of it, these are smart people. They went to journalism school. They're not idiots. They can think on their feet, but they're just choosing not to. It's kind of embarrassing.
Yeah, but people like Dana Bash and Jake Tapper are pretty standout examples of that. But it's interesting because you brought that up, Feroze. I remember you were. What'd you say? What, Mark? Sorry.
I said perfect examples of journalistic malpractice.
Yeah, journalistic malpractice. Yeah, blood on their hands. And Feroze, you brought this up because right after I spoke to you guys last year, there was a strike on a hospital that you were in, Feroze. And in fact, I believe one of your patients was killed. And had you been changing his dressing earlier, you could have been killed along with him.
Yeah.
And it was really heartbreaking because you guys had just gone through with me all of these cases. Like, you kind of ran through your schedule that day, and it was trying to fix this, trying to fix that, trying to fix this, trying to fix that. Someone who, if they survived, would have had a horrible life. And then this apparently, and then we checked in later over chat, and you were like, yeah, that girl died, this guy died. And then this guy whose dressing you were changing was actually one of the people who was like just going to go home and be okay, right?
Yeah, his name was Ibrahim. He was a 16-year-old kid. I learned more about him later, actually. He was when I met his dad, I don't speak Arabic, so I rely on a translator. But so I was talking to his people, kept saying this is his dad, and I assumed they were just mistranslating and saying it was his granddad, because he was way too old to be a 16-year-old kid's dad. And I was like, but eventually somebody told me, no, actually he is his dad. This kid was born from in vitro fertilization, and he actually has a twin who was killed at the beginning of the Israeli attack, the U.S. Israeli attack. So on March 18th, that's when, like Mark already mentioned, that's when the widespread bombing of Gaza resumed. And Ibrahim was the last case I did that day. He had shrapnel injuries to his colon and his rectum. I repaired them. I gave him a colostomy on the left side, and he actually did quite well. He was a pretty cantankerous kid. Like, you'd go into his room and you'd say, like, the way you push on someone's belly and you say "fi wajah," it means, does this hurt? And I do that. And he'd just go, like this typical like Palestinian way of saying no. And it was like, it definitely hurts, man. But he just didn't want to admit it for some reason. He was just the kind of kid that just wanted to tell you what you weren't planning on hearing. But he was a very sweet kid. He was smart. He had, I've deformed this poor kid. He has a colostomy, but he's just rolling with the punches. And on March 23rd, I remember it well because it happens to be my sister's birthday. We had iftar, and then I was going to go down to his room and change his bandages, change his colostomy one last time, and just explain to his family again, like, this is how you take care of it. This is, come back to the ER if something bad happens, blah, blah, blah. And to make a long story short, on my way down to his room, because we lived on the 4th floor and the men's surgical ward was on the 2nd floor. On my way down to his room exploded. The Israelis fired a missile at it because they wanted to kill the other guy in the room named Ismail Barhoum, who was a 56-year-old guy that they claimed was the prime minister of Gaza. I don't think he knew that, but whatever. And I actually wrote about this for the Council on Foreign Relations with Len Rubenstein. He's a professor at Johns Hopkins, specializing in international law, especially as it relates to attacks on healthcare. And what we wrote was that it's kind of a crime in multiple ways. Number one, firing an explosive weapon recklessly. So recklessly that it destroys literally the entire men's surgical ward, all 24, 25 beds that were in there. Almost kills me, kills a 16-year-old boy. All of that, even if Ismail Barhoum were a legitimate target, all of that is completely illegal. Secondly, the Israelis made no attempt. They didn't even pretend that they had told Hamas that they were that they considered Barhoum's presence in the hospital to be weaponization of the hospital. Which is a requirement under international law. Thirdly, Barhoum's presence simply was not a weaponization of the hospital. He was just a patient receiving healthcare. The Israeli spokesperson, I forget his name now, Nadav Shoshani maybe or something like that. He claimed that Barhoum had been in the hospital for weeks committing terrorism, which is like, okay, he was committing terrorism in the hospital. What the hell are you talking about? But leaving that aside, why would he have been in the hospital for weeks before when there was a ceasefire? Everyone else from Hamas was just walking around doing whatever they wanted. Why was this guy hiding in the hospital? And second, and also, why didn't any of us see him there? Like, there are no locked doors at Nasser Medical Complex. And then on top of that, just the sheer illegality of the whole thing, just considering him a combatant at all is absurd. Like he's just a patient receiving healthcare. Then combatants, even wounded combatants under international law, have the right to receive healthcare without being killed. That's actually the oldest part of the Geneva Convention, from 1864 or something. So yeah, the whole thing was just an unbelievably criminal act from start to finish. And yeah, Ibrahim paid the price, and like, I don't want to make it about me, but yeah, I was almost killed there too.
So awful. I remember feeling so awful for you guys about, I can't imagine what it's like to risk your lives to go somewhere to treat people and then have them die or be killed by Israel. Like totally, it's all unnecessary. And it's all a policy choice. None of this is natural anyway. But then the fact that you were treating someone who then gets killed in yet another attack. It must be so demoralizing.
Yeah, I've never had a patient killed in his hospital bed before. That's for sure. I've had them die, but not be murdered in their hospital bed. Pretty unusual.
And another disgusting entity that I thought would be good to talk about, which a lot of people are aware of this by now, and we mentioned this a little bit earlier, but the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is run by the U.S., but of course backed by Israel. And recently, there was a military veteran, Anthony Aguilar, who was a contractor for the private company UG Solutions, and he blew the whistle on the GHF that he was part of. And he, of course, confirmed what Palestinians have been saying all along, which is that Palestinians are being killed by the contractors who are intentionally firing on the Palestinians as they get aid. He's a Green Beret. And I want to show two clips. So here he is talking about this on Democracy Now!
Issued M855 green-tipped ammunition. That's important because green-tipped ammunition is a steel-jacketed copper round that's specifically designed to penetrate armor. It's designed to...
Sorry, so in case I was talking over it, he's saying that this is what they were issued.
Kill. It's designed to shoot through reinforced objects to kill someone on the other side of it. That's what all the UG Solutions contractors are equipped with right now in country. Everyone carries a standard basic load of 210 rounds of M855 armor-piercing military combat ammunition. Why would anyone need that? Even if to defend themselves, defend their lives against an unarmed population. It's inappropriate. That in and of itself, that action there is a war crime.
And now I'm going to play another excerpt. This comes from a site called Unacceptable, like UNXEPTABLE. And here's Aguilar recounting a personal interaction he had with a 5-year-old Palestinian child. And he describes this interaction and then describes what happens to this child. And it's trigger warning, it's very upsetting, but I think it's important to see.
And he put down the little food he has. You notice he doesn't have a box. He doesn't have a box of food. He has half of a bag of rice that he found on the ground, a broken bag, half a bag of lentils that he found on the ground, and he was thanking us. Thank you. This little boy, from where he came from, walked 12 kilometers to get there, just to get there. 12 kilometers. Look at this boy. And when he got there, he thanked us for the remnants and the small crumbs that he got. And he sets them down on the ground because I was kneeling at this point, and he sets his food down and he places his hands on my face, on the side of my face, on my cheeks, these frail, skeleton, emaciated hands, dirty. And he puts them on my face and he kissed me. He kissed me and he said, thank you, in English. Thank you. And he collected his items and he walked back to the group. And then he was shot at with pepper spray and tear gas and stun grenades and bullets shot at his feet and in the air. And he runs away scared. And the IDF were shooting at the crowd. So they're shooting to control the population that's along the Murad corridor. And as they're doing that, they're shooting into this crowd. And Palestinians, civilians, human beings are dropping to the ground, getting shot. And Amir was one of them. Amir walked 12 kilometers to get food got nothing but scraps, thanked us for it, and died.
So that's the America's contribution to this.
Right. Those were American-made bullets, no doubt.
Yeah, and American contractors also.
Right.
Yeah, you know, it's and Katie, you said something important at the beginning. You said, you know, the American media, and now they're finally saying what the Palestinians were saying. Actually, it's kind of interesting to see what else they ignored. There's a fellow, I believe his name is Yaakov Garb. I'm actually going to have lunch with him in the Bay Area in a few weeks. But he's an Israeli researcher, I think an anthropologist, if I remember correctly. But he's an Israeli researcher at Ben Gurion University in Beersheba. And he wrote a study for one of Harvard's research websites called the Harvard Dataverse, where before these things opened, all he did was look at satellite images of them. He just looked at them, and he said these all of the GHF sites are clones of each other. They're all exactly the same. And he wrote, and I can't remember the exact words, so I apologize to the listener, but what he concluded after looking at these satellite images was that these sites are specifically and deliberately designed to bring a civilian population into contact with the Israeli military, to leave them helpless, and to almost ensure that they get killed. So not only was the media ignoring what Palestinians were saying on the ground, they even ignored what Israelis said beforehand. And this was actually kind of interesting, because the reason I found this study, I don't read the Harvard Dataverse every day. The reason I found this study is because the media made a big deal out of a misinterpretation of one of the maps that happened, where people started saying, look, this Harvard study shows that 400,000 Palestinians are missing from Gaza. So Harvard says 400,000 Palestinians have been killed or fled. This is a misunderstanding. And in fact, it was just a misprint on the map. Fine. But the same people, they must have read the study. Like they're sitting here complaining. There was a whole show on the BBC. I think there was a whole show on Sky News. There was a whole show on some American network. Right. I can't remember which one now. And so they read the study. They knew exactly what it was, and they just used it to bash pro-Palestinian activists instead of actually to tell people what it said. Is absolutely. I couldn't believe it. When I actually read the study, I was like, why are they? I mean, they could say, yeah, look, this is a mistake. That's not what it says. But look at what it does say. Right. Good Lord. And that's exactly what happened. You know, Haaretz, after the GHF started operating, Haaretz interviewed I don't know, half a dozen Israeli soldiers. And I don't know if people noticed in the first clip that you played, but there's basically two huge groups of people, and there's a sandbank between them, and bullets keep hitting the sandbank, and people are trying to like jump across, because obviously the people in front thought they're gonna get access to the GHF, and the people behind are not, right? But there's a stream of bullets going. In other words, there's that stream of bullets divides the people who get to go versus who don't get to go. And the Israeli soldiers described that's exactly what they described doing. They said we were ordered to fire on people in order to control their movements. It had nothing to do with protecting us. No one ever fired back, and there was no concern that they were Hamas or any such stupid thing. And furthermore, that one of them even the phrase he used was, our method of communication with the Palestinians is gunfire. I mean, you don't need anything more than that. So not only is the American media ignoring what the Palestinians are saying, it's ignoring what Israeli soldiers themselves are saying. It's ignoring what Israeli researchers are saying. Like, how much more evidence do people need that this is an American project, not an Israeli project? You know, right. If this was like, oh, we just care about Israelis, we want to make sure Israel. Oh, well, maybe you would listen to their soldiers and the researchers if that was the case. But it's not the case. It's just not at all. This is 100% in our domain. We have every opportunity, not just to stop the GHF, but to stop all of this insanity. And we don't have to attack anybody. We don't have to bomb anybody. We just have to stop sending the weapons.
That's right. Remember, in the early 80s, Reagan stopped the bombing of Beirut with one telephone call in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
In which he called what Israel was doing a holocaust.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, because actually the thing that moved Reagan apparently was, he called Menachem Begin was the prime minister at the time. He called him and he said, I'm calling you for two reasons. One is to tell you that the symbol of your country is becoming a 3-month-old baby with its arms blown off, which was a picture that somebody gave him, and he was so moved by it that he put it on his desk. And we're talking about Ronald Reagan, which is actually your previous guest also mentioned him. He was hardly a peacenik. And then he said, secondly, if you don't stop the terror bombing of Beirut right now, there is going to be a major reevaluation of U.S. aid to Israel and the U.S.-Israel relationship in general. And exactly like Mark said, he brags that Begin called him back 20 minutes later and said the bombing is over. It won't restart.
Right.
It doesn't take anything, right. And just so people understand, the invasion of Lebanon was prior to Gaza. This attack on Gaza was Israel's greatest bloodletting up until now.
That's right.
Yeah. I think also Daryl Issa happens to be of Lebanese descent, which is interesting,
Lebanese.
right? Yeah.
Kind of amazing.
Yeah.
It's kind of it's a long discussion, but yeah, he is.
And, Mark, you mentioned the cutting out the Zionist cancer. And you are, I guess, you're a pizza bagel from what you said. You mentioned your Italian family and your Jewish family.
Right.
So were you raised with Zionist Mishigas? Was that shoved down your throat? Were you always critical of Israel? What was your evolution on this?
No, not at all. My understanding of Zionism really occurred when I sat next to a gentleman who's on the screen with me and who educated me on my first trip through the Sinai Peninsula for a 15-hour bus ride out of Cairo. I saw him in the crowd. I arrived at the caravan for departure. My plane landed a half hour before. I had time to go into the hotel and pee, and then surrender my suitcases to be loaded on top of a van and roped down. And as I'm standing around listening to people, only one person sounded like they knew what the hell they were talking about, and it was this guy named Feroze. So my commitment was to sit next to him for the 15-hour ride and learn things that I didn't know. I thought, who's the comedian with the puppets, Jeff Dunham? I thought that every Muslim was a terrorist. My exposure to Muslims was scant in where I practiced in Northeast Pennsylvania. It's not now. I embarrassingly was ignorant as to what Israel was doing in the world. I knew of the Gaza Strip. I knew of the West Bank. I did not make a commitment to understand what was going on. I believe the widespread American literature that every time a Muslim tries to defend defend anything about themselves, be it their territory or their heritage or their family, that they're labeled a terrorist. And that everyone that you see probably has 10 sticks of dynamite underneath of their vest. But my awakening didn't even happen on 9/11. I went to that, and that solidified my image that all the Saudis that were flying the planes were Muslim. So I never, in spite of the fact that I'm I probably have an average IQ. In spite of that, I never really challenged my own thought processes on understanding the truth. And so Feroze educated me on the way there about the history. I didn't hear about the March of the White Flags. I did not know that Gaza was not just a place with a fence around it, like he mentioned earlier. It's a fucking concentration camp. I was a plant doctor at a high security prison in the United States, and it was easier to get in and out of that than it was to cross in and out of Gaza, with far less risk of dying. And a mouse couldn't live cross in front of one of those automatic machine guns or 20-foot walls with razor wire surrounding all four sides of it. And it's a proverbial concentration camp, far more protected than the concentration camps that my father was part of liberating in World War II, and the death camps, and insanely more secure. And so he is my educator on this, and I honestly knew nothing about it before. Retrospectively, to a great degree of embarrassment, but prospectively, um, when the truth hits you, you really can't ignore it. Which is why I'm speaking to you tonight, hoping that somebody of Jewish heritage will realize that the bullshit that you've been fed your whole life, whether it's from your rabbi or whether it's from your school or whatever, um, it was heavily biased. And
Mark,
there's no.
when you told Palestinians in Gaza that you were Jewish, what would happen?
I'd get hugged. They would flock around me. I wore my father's mezuzah around my neck, and when it would fall out, an old man would come and grab it and kiss it. Their respect for Jews is immense. Their dislike for Israel is huge, but their respect for Judaism and Jews is unquestionably one of high respect. In fact, I interviewed an imam in a mosque that was bombed, and 65 kids were killed in that mosque bombing because the mosques were schools. And there's 12 kids left, 12, 15 kids left. And they're all studying in different parts of it, but they're all saying the same thing. Even though they're 15 or 20 feet apart, they're all reading in unison. And so I asked the imam, what are they reading a prayer? What are they saying? And he goes, they're all praying for Israel. And they're praying for the Israelis, that they somehow regain their closeness to God, that they're lost souls. They weren't praying for their families, they weren't praying for food. They were praying for the people that had killed all their classmates, 3/4 of their classmates, just a month before. And that was the 7th time that mosque was deliberately bombed.
Yeah, they were praying for the people who sing death to ARABS,
Yes.
and steal the toys of children and the lingerie of women.
That's right.
It's incredible.
Right.
Well, anything else that you want to make sure that we cover? I know how hard you guys work, and you've been really generous with your time, and I'm so grateful to both of you for your work, and Feroze, to you also for deprogramming Mark. I can't believe how.
Oh no, he wasn't programmed. He's overselling it. No, but you know, I still remember actually on the ride there. I mean, if you have the time, we'll tell the story. But on the ride across the Sinai, like Mark was saying, it was a long ride, and I remember telling him, and Mark, and again, this is totally to his credit that he went there at all. You know, he just saw children being hurt, and he said, "Well, I can help. Let me go help." Even though he thought all these people were psychopaths that wanted to kill him. But on the way there, he said, you know, I'm a little nervous going because I'm Jewish, and it's a completely sensible thing to think. And I told him, I still remember, I said, you know, Mark, I would never have believed this before I spent time in Israel and the West Bank, but where you're going, you will never find less anti-Semitism than in this place for some reason that I honestly just can't understand. Somehow the Palestinians have maintained the distinction in their minds between Israelis and Jews.
That's right.
Like in fact, when Palestinians speak in Arabic and they're talking about the Israelis, they say Yehudit, meaning Jews. But when they switch to English, they realize that that's going to be confusing for us, not for them, but for us. And so sometimes they'll still say, "Why do the Jews? Why do the Jews?" And someone will correct them and say, "No, not the Jews. You the Israelis." "Oh yes, no, of course, not all Jews, not you, Dr. Perlmutter." Or Dr. Mark, they all say Dr. Mark, but you know, the Israelis. And I remember it's just the first time someone told me that you know you'll never meet less anti-Semitic people in the Palestinians. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. There's no way that's true. It's one of the very few things that I think you can really learn by meeting the Palestinians in Palestine. I don't know if Katie, I don't know if you've had this experience in any way, but it's really kind of shocking that their culture has been maintained to such a degree that they still remember, like, oh yeah, my Jewish, my grandmother told me about the Jewish family that lived next door, and apparently they can't use fire on Fridays, so they used to turn their lights on and off for them, things like that. You know, it's just it's
the Shabbos goy.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But that was a thing, you know, and like these people live next to each other, especially in Jerusalem. And you know, it's just I don't know. I thought that was one of Mark's big revelations when he was there. So I thought it might be
It was huge.
Yeah.
But it exemplifies the level of brainwashing that goes on with the Israeli population. They're fed like baby birds the worm of Zionism from birth. So much so that it's easy for them to commit these atrocities. We had interviewed people outside of the medical complex. Behind the medical complex, the Nasser Medical Complex, there's a large field that was a grassed-in area with palm trees, and like many hospitals have, it's a courtyard for people to relax in. It was turned into a mass grave by the Israelis. People who witnessed people being buried in these graves told us a story, which we're pursuing with the ICJ now, of him witnessing two children being pushed into the mass grave by Israeli soldiers with a bulldozer, and then their cries being muffled by the dirt that was poured upon them while they were being buried alive. And then when the bodies were excavated, the red and green shirts of these kids, whose hands were tied behind their backs, were found. And the that type of monstrousness, that level of heinous behavior, can only happen if your hatred is formulated by design from your birth, right? Because these were accountants, these were laboratory workers, these were normal bankers. The soldiers that are called up to do these things were normal Israelis, and that's why when you look at the polls of the Israeli population, they're overwhelmingly in favor of the complete destruction of Gaza, because they were collectively brainwashed into thinking that all Palestinians are nothing but monsters. And terrorists, and out to kill every single Israeli. And so the only recourse is to in turn kill them. There is no common ground. The only good Palestinian to most Israelis is a dead Palestinian. And the only reason why they need to be dead is because I want your land, right? A Jew of European descent, an Ashkenazi Jew, has more rights to land in the West Bank. I can go there now and claim land in the West Bank, and I have more right to it. So could you. More right to it than a Palestinian whose family has lived there for 1,000 years. I could displace them, and the Israeli police will support me in even killing the Palestinian who applies for that.
Even to the point of them being internationally known, like, just in the past few weeks, an American from Tampa, a 20-year-old guy whose name I'm embarrassed to say I don't remember, has been beaten to death. I mean, quite literally beaten to death. And then the ambulance that was sent had a brick or a cinder block thrown through its window to stop it from going to get him. He's, I think,
Kamel Musalet.
That sounds right.
20 years old, was visiting.
20 years old. He owned an ice cream shop with his dad in Tampa.
That's by settlers. Yeah.
Yeah. He's the 6th or 7th Palestinian American who's been killed in the West Bank. Forget Gaza. Nobody has any clue how many Palestinian Americans have been killed in Gaza. But he's the 6th or 7th that's been killed since October 7th, just in the West Bank. This is including, like, I forget, an 11 or 13-year-old boy who was machine gunned. I mean, it's completely crazy. The level of, like Mark said, the level of dehumanization that's very, it's unfortunate, but is really very deep in the psyche of a lot of Israelis. Certainly not all of them, but a lot. Unfortunately, probably something like a majority. And
a vast
that's
majority, I would say.
It's a large majority. Yeah, I mean, it seems that way from polls. I don't want to make comments about Israeli society, which I don't know much about, to be honest. But I have lived there, but I can't say
polls suggest,
well. Polls do, and they do, and then pretty consistently, unfortunately. But this. I just want to make sure people understand that's why we matter here. Like we meaning Americans. We can continue pouring fuel on this fire, right? We can just keep giving more weapons and more weapons and more weapons and more weapons. And then they'll keep shooting and shooting and shooting and shooting. But if we stop the flow of weapons and the Israelis all of a sudden realize that they're not all powerful, that military violence actually has its limits because Uncle Sam is not going to provide people need to understand Israel doesn't make airplanes. Israel doesn't make humongous munitions like 2,000-pound bombs. Israel produces bullets and Israel produces drones, but they're not going to be able to repress a population that's basically the same size as the Israeli Jewish population, and they would have to come to some kind of reasonable agreement with them, whatever that would be. That's up to them. But we're just pouring fuel on the fire. And for people who are old enough and can remember the kind of flailings of apartheid South Africa at the end of apartheid, we backed their invasion of Namibia, we backed their invasion of Mozambique, killing 1 million or 2 million people. I mean, just an absolutely outrageous series of crimes as this white empire slowly died. But we don't have to do it that way. We could just stop providing the weapons now, and we could do this in some sort of controlled fashion where less people die and fewer people starve. And, would it turn into some paradise? No. And that's not like South Africa is not some wonderful place to live, but it's way better than what it used to be. And more importantly, we're not fueling this conflict anymore, and it can be resolved in some way by the people who actually live there and have to deal with it.
Right. Well, anything else that you want to make sure that we cover?
I would just ask your audience to study the difference between Judaism and Zionism to understand that you can be an absolutely marvelous Jew by hating Zionism.
It's a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah to hate Zionism.
That's right. The same way that it would have been just fine to be a proud German and hate Nazis.
More than fine. The righteous thing.
That's right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Katie, would you mind? I just was thinking, going back a little ways, Mark, when you were commenting on just the toxicity of AIPAC in this country and the horrific consequences in terms of the perverting of our representation and things like that, using words to describe basically giving up their humanity, their any sort of principles or morality and things like that, but using adjectives that could be linked to, say, sex workers. I know what you were trying to say, but I just wanted to be kind to anyone who might be, engaged in that sort of activity, that you wouldn't necessarily be equating the two, because I feel like that may be an insult to sex workers.
I agree.
I was looking just as a reference to remind some people, like in the UK, for example, going back 2 years ago, Sex Workers Union was criticized for signing a statement of solidarity with Palestine. But that makes sense to me. But then when you would mention how media figures would be committing journalistic malpractice on a daily basis, do you have any thoughts as to, like, can that be attributed to AIPAC and their influence, or would it be something else? Would these people?
I'm sure it has to do with who owns the company, their marketing dollars,
Some are true believers. Like, I really think that Dana Bash and Jake Tapper were raised Zionists.
Right.
Yeah.
But sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Mark.
No, I mean, it's like Blinken before his father-in-law and his uncle were actually worked for Israeli lobbies.
Right.
So the connections are deep and they're varied, but they're real. and they're through our movie industry, they're through our entire entertainment industry. It's clearly through our academic industry. Look at what Columbia is doing by oppressing free speech. Their logo defines the search of free thought.
Yeah.
And they violate that every day. This is the same academic institution that in 1936 and 39 fired a full professor for being pro-Nazi,
Right.
for being anti-Nazi.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And because back then the Nazi Party gave Columbia money, they gave our senators money. They had their version of an AIPAC to try to influence the opinion of American politicians to delay and prevent their entry into the war while they huddled the Roma and killed them. That type of money has always been available to to our legislature. It's those with ethics that choose to take it or to not take it.
Right.
My challenge to them is that they've aborted their ethics, and they're letting their morals be roasted at the expense of doing the right thing.
And I was thinking earlier, it's not just a sole act for, like, they would make that compromise of themselves, but it doesn't just affect themselves. It affects all of society and hundreds of thousands of people, dying and starving. And it's not just
their actions stop us from actually being humane people. Like, we don't want our money going to what it's being used for. And not I don't mean the four of us. I mean collective Americans. We just don't want to be involved in this.
Right.
I think another.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go for it, Mark. No, go for it.
I was just going to clarify something. I still maintain that they're prostitutes, but with full respect to sex workers, the definition of prostitute does not mean just a sex worker.
Right.
It's evolved into that, and that's probably the number one definition that shows up on a Merriam-Webster search, but it is not the primary definition of prostitute. So go ahead. I'm sorry, Feroze.
No, I was just going to say that, that there's some of them are, like, for them, Israel is the cause, right? So they just dive into it. But but I think there's something, there's probably more to it than that as well, which is like the Israel when they say we're supporting Israel, that's not really correct. The U.S. has been controlling the Middle East by force since 1945.
True.
And Israel is a very useful tool for doing that. The Israelis can murder random people who are organizing a union in Jordan or a union in Egypt. They can help train Egyptian and Jordanian special forces, who, of course, don't carry out special forces operations. They just torture and murder the wrong people. Right. They can, this goes on and on and on.
They sell a lot of weapons and nanotechnology.
They sell a lot of weapons. The Israelis do a lot of things that the U.S. just doesn't want its fingerprints on. Right. And this is something that Lily Greenberg Call kind of hinted at when she resigned from the state, or from the Department of Interior, I think it was. She was a young, probably in her late 20s, Jewish woman who I think was the first. Oh, have you really? Oh, great. Yeah, she's a very, very, very. She's quite a remarkable human being, actually, as far as I can tell. But she, in her resignation letter, she said, she centered the Palestinians, I think, but at the end of it, or at some point in the letter, she said, "I also can't countenance working for an administration that makes Jews the face of the American war machine." And that's correct. I basically saying that the U.S. is scapegoating Jews, just not Hitler did it by saying they're to blame for everything. Right. Biden and Trump and Austin and Blinken and McGurk and all these crazy people are doing it by saying, well, we're doing it to help them. Right. Okay, the effect is the same. It's all their fault in the end, it's not our pretty little innocent heads that are. It's just it's the Jews,
right? How do they think that's going to work out for Jews, by the way? But that's a
that's the thing, is they don't care about Jews. You do. Yeah. Mark does. Bradley seems to. But it's a major mistake to think that the powerful people in the United States, including powerful Jewish people, care about Jews in general.
Right.
You know,
That's
like
right.
if you think Bill Ackman cares about Jews generally,
Right.
you're
Not,
way off
right.
base.
And that's
Israel is nothing more than an air force and military base that represents our interests, the same way that our Navy base in Qatar
Yeah.
is, and UAE, you know. So, I mean, this is why Jared Kushner's Phoenix Holdings owns the largest shipbuilding business in Israel now. The same ships that challenged Greta Thunberg were built by Jared Kushner's company, which is backed 66% by the Saudis and the UAE and Qatar.
And that's a really good segue into what I was going to say, which is that the elite that rules the kind of corporate military nexus, whatever you want to call it, that, you know, they don't really care about being American. Right. They're not American. You're an American. I'm an American. They're not really. They could take it or leave it. Like every single time, this happens all the time. Anytime a Democratic administration threatens to raise taxes on the rich, what does the New York Times publish? Oh, they'll go abroad. Well, okay. I mean, yeah. In other words, they don't live here. They can live wherever they want. They're wealthy. They have more money than everybody. Like it's just they're not normal people. In other words. And these are not normal institutions, and they're really quite transnational. This is the ruling elite of an empire, not of a country. Like this isn't Nigeria or Burkina Faso, where our ruling elite is pretty local, but no, our ruling elite is international. So they don't see like, oh, it's America, or like the American and Israeli ruling elite, or again, political echelon, whatever you want to call them, are not separate entities. And I think that explains a lot of why American commentators and other such people who are close to power and want to be as close to power as they can be, they just don't distinguish between the two of them because they're not. Because to be fair, they're not different entities. They're really just not that different, And there's another thing about it, which is that right now the Israelis are doing to Gaza what we did to the Navajo and the Hopi and all sorts of other people. Now, we did it a long time ago when but it's not like it was not known at the time that it was a bad thing to do. That's argument it's made all the time, but it's totally ridiculous. Like who was it? Maybe John Adams or John Quincy Adams, I can't remember, that said the destruction of the native peoples is one of the great sins that the U.S. will be brought before God to answer for. Helen Hunt Jackson wrote A Century of Dishonor back then. Like none of this was like, no one was like, oh yeah, this is totally a moral and decent thing to do. They just said, well, we're strong and we'll do whatever we want. And came up with all sorts of crazy ideas about advancing, civilization and getting rid of mud races and things like that. So there's some, I can't prove it, but I think there's some sense of that too, which is, we did it, so why is it wrong?
Right.
And so all of this is, it's more like what Mark's talking about is definitely true. There's the AIPAC money, there's the AIPAC propaganda, not just AIPAC, the Israel lobby money and propaganda, but it's very, very tightly caught up in the American side. And from the Christian Zionists, exactly. All of this is just to say that it's all caught up in the same corporate and military nexus that rules all of our lives. And that's until that's dealt with, we're not going to have a democratic country, and 80% of people's opinion just won't matter.
Right. I think it's a really scary feedback loop where you have, like, I do think that initially, and what's ultimately driving this is Western hegemony, the interest of the West. But then you have true believers. Like I truly think that Jake Tapper and Dana Bash think that they are acting to protect the lives. I mean, they're totally wrong, and they're bigots and they're racist. But I think, and I'm not exonerating them, I'm just saying the way that, like, what is Marx right about superstructure, right? So you have ideology that is and culture that supports the economic structures. But, even the idea that people have that Europe felt bad about what happened to the Jews, and that's why they supported the creation of the state of Israel. Of course, Europe and the West, if they felt bad about what happened to the Jews, first of all, they would have during the Holocaust let them in, but certainly afterwards, they would have let them in. They didn't. They felt so bad that they just wanted them to go to another place and not go into their country. So, I mean, even from the very beginning, it was a colonial project. But what's so sad is that, so many people have drunk the Kool-Aid, the Manischewitz, if you will, and to our detriment. I mean, ironically, but it is. And now it's like a Frankenstein. And people run around thinking that this is going to keep Jews safe. I mean, it's so obvious to me that, what could be better for anti-Semites than to be able to point, not that they care, anti-Semites don't care about Palestinians, but to be able to point to a live stream genocide that they know the world opposes and say that that's being done for and by the Jews.
That's right.
And
that's why Israel's the biggest threat to Judaism in the world that world has ever known.
Yeah. And they call us self-loathing. I'm like, Jews who speak out against Israel it's not my primary motivation at all. I mean, I speak out against Israel because I think what they're doing is wrong. I think it's, I'm not going to let them speak in my name, but it's actually ironically the Jews who speak out against Israel that will, if anything makes Jews safe, it would be that. Not signing on to what Israel's doing.
Yeah, the idea that ruling elites in the United States and Europe give half a shit about Jews as a people is ludicrous. Like, it's beyond insane. Anybody who wants to read about this, there's a good book. The English version is called In the Shadow of the Holocaust. It's an old book. I think came out in like maybe the late 90s, early 2000s, somewhere around there. The fellow who wrote it is Israeli, but the Hebrew title is more instructive. I won't try to mispronounce it. It's something like Homer and Nashi Tov or something, but it apparently means good human material. That's how Ben Gurion described the survivors of the Nazi death camps, the people who had been, because you got to remember after the
struggle between in the shadow of the Holocaust, the struggle between Jews and Zionists in the aftermath of World War II, which I need to buy, by Yosef Gronzinski. That's
his name. I couldn't remember.
It's
worth reading. Half of Europe wanted to move to the United States after World War II. It's not, obviously all the Jews in the DP camps did, but he shows, it's a pretty shameful chapter. He shows how the kind of pre-state Zionist organizations basically tricked them all into moving to Palestine. So that they could be cannon fodder. It's pretty shocking history, but it kind of shows you that even Israeli elites don't really care about Jews, which is, and that's not that surprising when you have a supremacist ideology,
right?
What's his name? Gideon Levy writes that in the modern day, you can talk about what Zionism used to be in the 1920s and the 1890s. And okay, fine. Yes, it was a much broader movement back then. There's no doubt about that. But in the modern era, Zionism means Jewish supremacy.
Yes. 100%.
Then that's the, and like it's the same thing B'Tselem said, it's 2016 or something, a report about whether or not Israel is an apartheid state. They just said, what is going on between the river and the sea? Well, there's one sovereign, obviously, that's Israel. And the guiding principle for everything is the supremacy of Jews over others. It's a Jewish supremacist state, the same way we had a white supremacist state in the United States or in Nazi Germany or in South Africa. And that when you have these ideologies, they tend to subsume the human being to the state. The state ends up being the entity that has to be preserved at the cost of the human beings that are there. And that's why these just end up cannibalizing themselves. Right now, Israel, half of reservists aren't showing up because they don't want to go back to Gaza. The moneyed and educated elite is fleeing the country. They're so caught up with their military might that they thought they could fight a war with Iran without the United States. It's just total insanity. But when that's the kind of thing that happens, when the supremacist ideology gets out of hand, this is kind of where it ends up. It's not unique to Israel, and this, it's kind of unfortunate to see, but it's
we just went to this the first Jewish anti-Zionist Congress, which was held at in Vienna, and it wasn't. I mean, there were Jewish speakers largely, but it was also very much focused on the one-state solution. So there are also Palestinian speakers. Ramzi Boud, whose is that? Is that okay? Great. Zionists are trying to silence you for us. Ramzi Boud was there. Ghada Karmi was there, and one of a really great book that I would highly recommend. We've had him on before. It's called Zionism During the Holocaust, and it's by Tony Greenstein. And he really documents how much more the Zionists were interested in building a state than they were in rescuing Jews. And there's that famous disturbing quote from Ben Gurion, going back to Ben Gurion, where if he said, if he had to choose between saving, I say this in a later interview on this very show, if he had to choose between saving twice as many Jewish children by sending them to England versus saving half as many Jewish children by sending them to Palestine, he would have chosen Palestine. And as Tony also said, says in his appearances and his writing, that if all Jews stop supporting Israel today, the West wouldn't stop supporting Israel. I mean, it would be harder to do because they wouldn't have the moral alibi, as Tony also calls Jews. But
because Jews don't matter to our government.
Yeah. It is a project. It's a political project. And if you want to read, I mean, we've talked about this with, I highly recommend also Yaakov Shapiro's book. Where is it? It's not behind me. The Broken Wagon, Zionism from Identity Crisis to Identity Theft. But, you know, he compiles all the really hateful things that early Zionists said about Jews, you know, Jabotinsky, Ben-Gurion, Herzl, you know, they talk about the diaspora Jew as being disgusting. There's a lot of anti-Semitism there. So,
wow.
Yeah, it's really important stuff. And we're actually, you guys would be interested in this. We're working on a documentary about, the Empty Wagon. Sorry, not the Broken Wagon, Empty Wagon. We're working on a documentary about Jewish Holocaust survivors who are speaking out against the genocide in Gaza.
Hundreds.
Because, what?
Hundreds.
Mm-hmm.
Hundreds of them, you're saying?
Many, 300 at least.
Yeah.
Have voiced already.
Yeah. So it's, I think, really important to not let Israel, you know, because they've weaponized the Holocaust, and they've totally distorted what never again means. So it's really important, I think, to show that and Israel also mistreated the survivors. I mean, again, it's not like I would have been okay with what Israel did to Palestinians if it was good to the survivors, but it just reveals the bankruptcy and the big lie that Israel is, knowing that they, a lot of Holocaust survivors lived in poverty, for instance. Again, because they just don't care. And we also
it goes even deeper. They bombed their own synagogues in Iran and Iraq.
And Egypt, We interviewed Avi Schleim about this. Yeah.
The Hannibal Directive, the ignoring of the current hostages, you know.
Exactly. That's the theme. The theme is that Israel doesn't care about Jews and they're willing to kill them. And you get called a conspiracy theorist, but the Hannibal Directive, which the Israeli media talks about. The Western doesn't, but the Israeli does. Exactly. It's the treatment of the hostages, the disregard for the hostages, the killing of Israeli Jews, the Hannibal Directive, the bombing of the Jewish places in Iraq and Egypt to get Jews to leave there and come to Palestine, come to Israel.
The direct killing of the Jewish hostages on October 7th.
Yeah, the mass Hannibal, as it's been called. Yeah,
and just so people understand, it's not unusual for a state to deprioritize the security of its population. Our own country does exactly the same thing, not in such blatantly obvious ways, but nevertheless, it's like in the Cuban Missile Crisis, just to take one crazy example, Kennedy estimated that the risk of nuclear war, if they went ahead with what they were doing, was a third to half. And he went ahead with it anyway, because he just would not accept that the Russians have a right to station missiles in Cuba, and we have a right to station missiles in Turkey. He said, no, we have a right to station missiles in Turkey, and you don't have a right to station missiles in Cuba. So that without, he was willing to risk half of the terminal nuclear war, destroying the entire world, which we actually got one word away from during the crisis, in order to just prove that we own the world and the Russians don't.
Right.
That's a pretty shocking deprioritization of the lives of American citizens, who all of them would have been killed. Literally, all of them would have been killed.
Right. Yeah.
So this is not unusual, but it's when you have a country that is so constantly talking about the Holocaust, the history, the Cossacks, the pogroms, that, all of which is real, but it's kind of it's almost too in your face.
Yeah. It's just that people, I know a lot of American Jews who I think that even if they're kind of patriotic about America, they think of Israel really is guided more about defending the lives of Jews than America is about defending the lives of Americans.
Well,
Someone in the
I was
comments.
just going to show myself out. I just wanted to thank you too so much for all of
What
your
am I,
time
chopped
with
liver?
my no.
I'm
Thank
just
you,
kidding.
Katie.
I'm not a doctor. I don't save
But
lives.
and just that, speaking just for myself, the way that you articulate correctly, in my opinion, the connection between all of these different entities and how it all comes together, I can, at least for me, understand how easy it is for that to just feel so daunting and so like unsolvable, that regardless, I just kind of intuitively feel like whatever the solution is, it is most certainly people like yourselves that are doing good regardless on the ground, and then also then coming back and helping to better inform people, because if people don't know, then I mean that's step one, and so just thank you so much for everything that you do.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, power only works in the dark. It doesn't work when dragged out into the light anymore.
Yeah. Well, this has been really amazing. I feel like I was going to say one more thing, but I can't remember. But thank you so much. You guys are really, truly heroes. And wow, Feroze, you're like double hero, because you like spawned Mark as an anti-Zionist. So you get twice the amount of credit.
Mark, with what Mark saw in Gaza, he would have.
Yeah.
With what Mark saw in Gaza, he didn't need me to explain. This is actually one of the things that, I know, I'm sorry, I know we've been on for 2 hours.
No, I'm love this.
You don't need a PhD. Like, yes, I have been reading about this conflict since I was 18. I've edited some books on the topic. You're
a big Norman Finkelstein fan.
Yeah, I helped edit some of Norman's books. I'm not somebody who, I wouldn't say I'm an expert in the conflict, but I know a lot about it. But you don't have to. Especially for what's going on right now, we are starving a territory that is half children. That's what we're doing. We're regularly shooting children in the head. We are blowing up families with their children on purpose. That's what the Lavender that it is quite
deliberately targeted.
The way that people are targeted is deliberately with their families. Oh. Yeah, the name of the program is actually "Where's Daddy?"
Where's your daddy
seems to be to people. That is what we're doing. You don't need a PhD in conflict resolution or in Arab-Israeli history or to have grown up in Avi Shlaim's house or something like that to know what these things are. This is just wrong. Just like you didn't need a PhD in the history of Vietnam to oppose the Vietnam War. It's just not that complicated. All people need to understand is that we are pouring fuel on an ethno-supremacist fire, and it's not helping anyone. And again, I don't mean to contradict Bradley, but Mark and I are not the solution. Mark and I can talk to people all we want, but the solution is for Americans to wake up and to say, look, this is a democratic country. I get to decide what my tax dollars are used for. We get to decide that. And we don't have to accept that the attitude of 80% of the country just doesn't matter. We don't have to accept that. We don't have to wait until the next election. There is a lot that you can do. If you don't know, go to the closest Jewish Voice for Peace meeting, go to the closest Christians United for Palestine or whatever. There's a bazillion organizations working.
Your group, Feroze, what is your small ethno group that you mentioned in the beginning?
Oh, my family is from my parents are from an ethnic group called the Parsis. There is no Parsis United for Palestine that I'm aware of.
Well, you can start it.
I believe me. If I start something related to the Parsis will run in the opposite direction.
Oh, okay. All right.
But
there might be pizza bagels for Palestine.
That would be great food. Yeah, pizza bagels for Palestine. That's great.
I like it. But that really is the case. I'm so sorry. There's some guy hammering in my garage. But
probably Zionist.
No, he's not.
I'm just kidding.
There are a huge number of groups working on these things. Just go find one. Yes, it's uncomfortable to meet people you've never met. Yes, Americans don't like to talk about politics. It's okay. Just go do it. It's worthwhile. If Miss Rachel can do it in the middle of negotiating a deal with Netflix and put all that in danger just because she cares about children. Purely in the abstract. It's not that she doesn't love Palestinian children more than other children. Just like, I don't love Palestinians more than other people. That doesn't make any sense to me. That she just doesn't want to be involved in the murder of children, and neither should the rest of us.
Right.
And we should be willing to do something about it.
And then keep in mind that elections are coming up. There's things that you can do now, but keep your eye on the election ball. Google the AIPAC contribution to your senators and your legislatures. Those that were, and I maintain the word is accurate, those that are prostitutes of the Israeli lobby should not garnish your vote if you have an ethical backbone. If you don't want to be part and parcel of the incineration of a kid and their family, if you don't think that your tax dollars should be murdering children, then don't vote for people who give Israel money. It's simple.
Yeah. Well, amen to that. Thank you guys so much. This is such an amazing conversation. And I love that it ranged from, you know, medicine to history to Parsis and pizza bagels and everything in between. But really, I do want to thank you guys for what you do, because it is actually a shame that there isn't a bigger response from the whole medical community. But that's another episode that we can talk about.
You can.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Please come back.
We will.
This was great. Great. Have a great night, guys. Thanks so much. Wow, that was amazing. We're about to bring on. That was so great. What a great chat. They're both absolute heroes. We are about to bring on Daniel Davis, but I want to quickly, by the way, show that disgusting, just so people can see what we were talking about. Excuse me. Some of these tweets that try to deny the starvation that's happening right now. So here, for instance, is that writer. Here's what that we were talking about. Here's what that writer had to say in a now deleted tweet. So Barry Malone tweets, "This is one of those images you instantly know will appear in history books of the future, and people will wonder how we allowed this to happen. It's a very thin mother, very thin woman, holding a skeletal baby whose backbone and ribs you can see, who is wearing a garbage bag instead of a diaper. And someone named Daniel Friedman thought it'd be appropriate to write underneath, 'I'm sorry the Palestinians' widespread practice of cousin marriage produces so many children with congenital conditions and diseases, but you cannot blame that on the Jews.'" Okay, so that's one example. Do you guys have the other examples? I think I sent you, just to show, again, desperate people have desperate arguments. And it is so obvious that there is a policy of starvation, and it's being done by the government. It's also being done by, we've seen the videos. We had Jeremy Lafredo, who was kidnapped and beaten up by Israel. He has video of just random Israeli civilians. I'm sure they were in the IDF, but they're currently just civilian randos who are bringing their kids to block aid trucks, because that's a great thing to do with the whole fam. Here's another example of this. So, this is so stupid. Okay. So random person, Michael Michelle writes, "Hi, Katie, here is his healthy weight brother. Why didn't you show him or address why the mother is well fed? Strange." And so again, the smaller you are, the more you have to eat, the higher metabolism is. Sorry, that doesn't fly. And then we have a couple more examples of that, just to show you guys. It's widespread. So here's Gazawood, the Pallywood saga. That's Pallywood is what people call anything that's actually factual and about how the crimes of Israel. It's Pallywood, like Hollywood. So this person writes, "Irony is when a well-fed woman like her screams that they haven't seen meat in 2 years." Okay, and then yeah. And then I think, is there one more example? We don't no. Okay, well, there are more of them. Just know that these people are desperate, and I actually feel bad for them because they're total monsters. But I feel bad for them, but I also think that they should be shamed and never allowed in polite society. Or honestly, they should be hounded wherever they go. Okay, so let's see. We are moving now on to our third interview. Can't believe what a marathon tonight has been. Such great guests. We're about to bring on Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, who is a 4-time. Excuse me. Sorry, hold on one second. Let me make sure I have my most recent version of this. Okay. Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis is a 4-time combat veteran, host of the Daniel Davis Deep Dive on YouTube. He was one of the earliest military officers to publicly criticize the war in Afghanistan. In 2025, Davis was selected by Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard for appointment as Deputy for Mission Integration. Gabbard withdrew the selection prior to Davis's appointment after news of his pendency leaked, likely, over his criticism of Israel. So without any further ado, Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis. Thank you so much for joining.
Certainly my pleasure. Always glad to be here.
So there's been so much going on right now in the world that is absolutely haunting, horrific. We're going to cover a lot of that, but I want to start off with Gaza because I don't think we can have a discussion about the state of the world without talking about Gaza. And I know that you just had did an interview with the wonderful genocide Holocaust scholar Omar Bartov, who himself has evolved on the issue. He at first was reluctant to call it a genocide. I want to know if you consider a genocide, when you started to consider it a genocide, and what your perspective is as a member of the military.
Listen, I thought it was a genocide from the very beginning. Well, not very beginning, but very early, I'll say, from a military perspective, from an analysis of what the stated goals of their operation were and what their behavior were just incompatible. The Israeli side said that, we're going to punish Hamas for the horrible terrorist attack that they did on 10/7. Who would blame them for that? They had every right to do that. What happened was an atrocity, but the way they went about it was completely wrong. At first, I thought, well, they're just zealous to repay what happened, and they just went too far. But then it became clear within a number of months, 3 or 4 months at most, to where I started going, hang on, this is not just trying to defeat the organization of Hamas. I mean, you don't even know who the Hamas people are. You're not doing operations in any way that would imply that you're trying to distinguish between the fighters and the civilian population. And then you just see that this methodical destruction of the city. And that's when I said, no, this is a genocide. This is a plan. I had a hard time believing that, even though the words are coming out of my mouth and what my eyeballs see on the ground, because that doesn't happen in the modern world, and certainly not with Israel that I grew up admiring, because they're the democracy, the flower of the Middle East, and the one island of stability, and all this kind of stuff. So obviously they're the good guys. So naturally they wouldn't do that. So even though my eyes are seeing it and my military analysis is seeing things that are completely incompatible, I had a hard time accepting it. But it didn't take too many more months until when I said, no, this is definitely, they are seeking to methodically destroy the way of life for these people so that there's no way that they can recover. And then it turned really from that to the food became the weapon in the latter portion of this. And that's what distinguished it before. Before I thought, well, they're just trying to make it bad so that the Palestinian people can't live here anymore and somebody has to take them. They have to go somewhere else. And this is just speculation on my part, when that didn't work, then I think they moved to the next phase, which was, all right, now we're going to use food as a weapon and create this situation that is so humanitarian disaster of proportions that have never been seen since the Holocaust, that now that'll compel people to do it, or it'll succeed in depopulating the Gaza Strip in a different way. And that's the best assessment that I can come up with. And I find it incredibly distressing.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so horrific that this country that was founded supposedly to protect people from the Holocaust on the slogan of never again is, as you said, I mean, I've interviewed so many people lately who, without my asking them, they have just volunteered. They'll say stuff like, I used to always avoid comparing the Nazis to the Israelis, and now I can't avoid it anymore. They're not equating them. They're not saying, they're the same exact thing, but there are definitely too many similarities, I think, for people to not at least point out the irony in that a nation that was founded in theory to protect people from a genocide is perpetuating a genocide. And it's interesting what you said. I mean, has this changed the way you understand Israel, not just today, but its founding?
I don't know that I would say it's founded, because I think that it was, I mean, you can never say it was legit in terms of dispossessing the people who were living there, and the Nakba and all that went along with that can never be justified. But it certainly was reasonable to me that the victims of the Holocaust of World War II, would want to go somewhere where they would be safe and where they could provide for their own national security, wouldn't have to rely on anybody else. That certainly made sense. But, what happened over time has morphed into something rather darker.
Yeah, I think, I'm looking at this more and more. It's interesting. I don't know if I've talked about this with you. I think maybe I said this on your show, but I'm making a documentary about Holocaust survivors who are speaking out against the genocide in Gaza, saying not in our name, never again is now. When Netanyahu says never again is now, he's distorting it, they say, and I would agree. The never again is now is not about what's happening to the Israelis. It's about what Israelis are doing to Palestinians. But what I didn't really realize until I started working on this was how Israel didn't talk about the Holocaust during the first 2 decades of its founding. It started talking about it after 1967, and it also started talking about it after the Eichmann trial. And it didn't treat Holocaust survivors very well. They called them soaps, which was a reference to the myth that the Nazis turned Jewish corpses into soap. It wasn't true, but just an example of the contempt with which they held these people. They took reparations from Germany that were meant to go to survivors, and the government took it. So I've just been on this journey where I've been critical of Israel today for a while, but I've really been also made aware of how, I always knew the founding, in my opinion, was problematic in the way that you just referred to it, dispossessing other people to make a home for people who, again, it's not like they went to Germany and kicked the Germans out, right?
Right.
The Palestinians had nothing to do with what happened to the Jews during the Holocaust. But even their treatment of survivors, and they really, a lot of them prioritized building a nation over saving survivors. Sorry, I'm turning this into a monologue. You're the guest. I'll wrap up really quickly though. But there's even this quote from Ben Gurion who said, if he had the choice between saving twice as many Jewish children by sending them to England, or saving half as many Jews by sending them to Palestine, he would send them to Palestine, which is crazy to me. But can you talk more about the relationship between the United States and Israel? Obviously, the U.S. government and U.S. media constantly talks about the special relationship between those two countries. And there seems to be a really unwavering support of Israel, no matter what, that comes from the West. Now we're seeing a bit of a change finally. But can you talk about the way that you came up against this issue? Because as we talked about on Useful Idiots, the show that I co-host with Aaron Mate, you were removed from consideration for a job with Tulsi Gabbard, and it was suspected that it was because of comments that you had made about Israel. Can you expand on what happened?
Well, it wasn't suspected. It was outright declared by I think it was called J-Life was the publication that actually headlined "Victory. Gabbard drops Davis," and then they went on, because they did quote many things that I had written about and had said on Fox and several other nations networks, etc. Ironically, I wasn't a smear per se, because what they quoted me as saying was accurate and what I actually believe. So I didn't dispute what they had said. But the fact is that there were many supporters of Jewish people, or the state of Israel, the Israeli government at least, that don't want anybody saying anything except for yes, whatever Benjamin Netanyahu said. That's the only thing that they want. And anyone who diverges at all from that storyline is considered a threat, and it needs to be resisted. I certainly wasn't the only one. There's quite a number of people in the Trump administration that came under that kind of scrutiny. I was just one of the ones that got hit right before almost getting in the door, et cetera. But I think that it's a very pernicious situation. It's actively done, but it's also it's not just, the so-called Israeli lobby that does this. A lot of the people do it to themselves. The one of the most I consider horrible and just shameful, humiliating examples was just yesterday, where you had the U.S. ambassador talking about how there's not really any kind of starvation going on. In fact, it was just some kids who had some developmental issues. Huckabee said this on Fox News yesterday. And, and it was just not true. And if there is any starving, and there's not, but if there was, it's because of those darn Hamas guys. They're the ones that are doing all this. And, that you don't have to have much knowledge. And although Professor Bartov on our show that we did today just graphically talked about how it is Israel that set up the system. It's not Hamas. And by the way, even with the way they're doing it right now, they have no idea where the food's going. It's not preventing it from going to Hamas. It's just preventing people from getting it. He specifically talked about, Bartov did, how it was most of these sites are located in the southern part because they only want the few places where they can get food. They want people to have to travel all the way down there. Of course, foot or donkey's cart is almost the only way you can move. The idea is to get them out of the north and then further move them to the south. So there is intentionality to how they do this. It's not to keep it out of Hamas. It's just nonsense. But yet here is Ambassador Huckabee just literally repeating whatever Benjamin Netanyahu said. And I find that very unsavory and morally bankrupt. And especially because the same day, at least you had President Trump in a question and answer period in I think London, where he said, see, you can't really hide this. There's starvation going on, et cetera. We gotta see what we can do to stop that. So the ambassador seems to be out of step with the president. But then again, president can say a lot of different things here. But I find the unwillingness of so many in the United States to acknowledge what their eyes see and what the evidence shows is profoundly as can be, if you're willing to look at it and yet continue to hold on to this, just as a humanitarian person, somebody who just cares about human life, period. We, especially many on the right, love to say, we talk about the right to life and all that, and we care about the unborn and all that. Well, how about caring about any human life? And even in wars, it's like it used to be. It's like, all right, well, the combatants, I get that. Like in the Russia-Ukraine war, we get that. And sometimes there's collateral damage, and that's unfortunate on both the Russian and the Ukraine side. But there's at least the pretend that we care about people. But this time, the entire population of Palestine, both in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, has just been erased. Like they don't even qualify as human beings. So we don't care. And that I cannot explain, I cannot fathom, and it wounds me to my soul. I'll just tell you.
Yeah, what is the deal with this allegedly pro-life perspective? Huckabee talks about Jesus Christ a lot, Christianity a lot, God a lot. How can he possibly kind of reconcile his disregard for not just, obviously for Palestinian children, women, men, everyone, civilians, but also they've attacked and bombed churches in Gaza. This is an attack on the Christian people of Gaza. Now, just to be clear, I don't care more about Christians than Jews and Muslims. Like for me, it's a life is a life. But how is it that for so many evangelicals, when it comes to Palestinian lives, they're no longer pro-life?
I have, that has been all just because I am a strong Bible believing Christian, and I follow Jesus Christ, et cetera. And I study the word very carefully. And I just wounds me to how some of my co-religionists don't seem to actually read the book and certainly don't apply it to everyone. And I don't know the cognitive dissonance between what we say on Sunday and then how we believe and how we respond to the Palestinian people, as though every Palestinian, infants all the way up to grandfathers, were somehow complicit in what happened on 10/7, and so they all deserve death. And there's just no concern. Even if you're just looking at it, what puzzled me from the beginning was, even from a narrow religious perspective, there was a sizable portion or percentage of the population of Gaza that was Christian.
Right.
It's not like they're all Muslim. There was, I think the number, it wasn't a huge number. It was like maybe 40,000 or so. But I'm like, don't y'all even care? There were Christian churches in there that, of course, they've been demolished like everything else. Not just that one you're talking about recently, the Catholic Church, but there's been plenty of others. But they're suffering just like everybody, because those bombs don't care a damn about your religious background or anything. If a bomb goes off, it's going to blow up whoever. And why do you not care about? about the co-religious. If it'd be one thing, Katie, if you said, "Oh, it just wounds me that our brothers and sisters in Christ here are paying this price. Let's do what we can to get them taken care of." Or so. There's none of that. They're just the Palestinians, and they're all bad. And I don't get it from a humanitarian perspective. Again, I guess I'm like you in that sense. I don't care anything about what their personal religion is or isn't, or atheist or anything else. They're human beings, as we believe, created in the image of God, and therefore have inherent value among themselves, which we say when we're talking about the unborn, etc. But apparently that's just the unborn of, I don't know, our particular country, and the unborn of another country we don't seem to care about.
Yeah. Or maybe once you're born, it doesn't matter. It's only pro-life for the preborn. It is.
And then, but although Professor Bartol told us this on the show today too, that there is tremendous harm being caused to kids that are pregnant women right now. So it affects them as well, every category.
And high rates of miscarriage also.
Yeah. He's like 300% normal.
So disgusting. Yeah. I mean, obviously I agree with what you said. And it's not, I don't think it's like Christian to only care about Christians, but it's almost like they're not even pretending to care about Christians. Like, I think that I'm not a Christian, but from my reading of Jesus, and the Bible, the message seems to be about lives, human beings in general. It's not like it would be okay if Huckabee just cared about Christians in Gaza and didn't care about Muslims. But it's just ironic that he doesn't even on like a superficial level pay lip service to caring about the Christians in Gaza. But obviously the Christian thing to do is just care about suffering. Everybody. And everybody. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what is the motive for the United States government to be so unwaveringly supportive of Israel? We had on, and I know you've had on Professor John Mearsheimer on your show. And so there's kind of a debate. There's the wag the dog debate, whether it's Israel serving the interests of the United States or the United States serving the interests of Israel, or kind of a feedback loop. But what does the United States get from being so supportive of Israel?
We don't get anything. I think it is just on an autopilot feedback loop. I think that's a pretty good way to put it, in that it's just the way it's always been. And I'm talking about for decades or so. And you certainly can't talk about this without talking about the pro-Israeli money that's in the politics, and the lobbying and the supporting campaigns, the outright attacking anyone who doesn't toe the line. I mean, we've seen in the last couple of cycles, especially in the House of Representatives in the last election, where members of the Democratic Party who weren't deemed sufficiently Israel and weren't supportive the way they thought, they went after them in the primaries and got rid of them. They succeeded. So that message rings loud and clear to everybody. And so they don't want to be opposed like that. So they'll either be silent or they'll be supportive if they can. But they're afraid to stand out and do the otherwise. And plus, they know there's a lot of money there. And they want to get some of it because they want to win an election. They want to stay in office if they get there. And I just don't think that you can, dismiss that as a major compelling factor. Forget about ideology, forget about benefits or anything else. This keeps me in power. This keeps me in office. So I'm in. I want some of that money. I think that that's a big part of it.
Right. So is there anything, so there's the lobby, obviously, but is there anything that the United States gets from it? Like any strategic benefits, or maybe it was strategically beneficial during the Cold War and now it's done? Was there ever a benefit?
You can make some plausible argument that during the Cold War there might have been, just kind of gives us a foothold in the region. But I argue that we didn't need it. We don't have to have a foothold in Israel. And I don't know that we even got a benefit from it there. Now I can tell you unequivocally, it is a net loss. It is an albatross around our neck, an anchor, to our butt kind of thing. Because, I mean, just look at what's happened since, this whole war started off here. I mean, we've had these absurd operations in the Red Sea against the Houthis. All that's done is drain our stocks of air defense interceptor missiles. It's caused lots of disputes and lots of funding period just to be able to patrol those waters. Didn't solve the problem. Then the now 3 rounds of attacks from Iran into Israel. Again, we just had to use tons of our own ammunition to shoot those things down. Then naturally, we just have to drain our coffers on top of what we're doing in the Ukraine with Israel throughout this time war period, because they can't do any of this stuff without this constant flow of ammunition, all of which draws down our stocks in every one of these categories, because our manufacturing potential or capability is not sufficient to handle that kind of an outflow on a sustained basis. So it's weakened our national security. It's put our troops at risk. Some of our troops actually were killed as a part of this in Jordan, only because they were there and accessible to these Iranian-backed groups that attacked them in some of the cases. Many others, scores more, have been wounded. Only those 3 have been killed so far, but this is all just a net loss and a cost to the United States. We gain absolutely nothing from this.
Right. I wanted to play a clip of Trump talking about what's happening right now in Gaza. This is an interesting contrast from what he said before, when he was talking about how much the United States was helping the people of Gaza and how we should be getting a thank you. Now he seems to have changed his tune a little bit. So I'm going to play this clip of Trump and then have you react to it.
It's going to be working with the United States. We'll be helping with the food. You know, we have a lot of access to food. We got a lot of food ourselves, and we're going to bring it over there. We're also going to make sure that they don't have barriers stopping people. You know, you've seen the areas where they actually have food, and the people are screaming for the food, and they're 35, 40 yards away, and they won't let them because they have lines that are set up. And whether they're set up by Hamas or whoever, but they're very strict lines, so we have to get rid of those lines. But we're going to be getting some good, strong food. We can save a lot of people. I mean, some of those kids that's real starvation stuff. I see it. And you can't fake that. So we're going to be even more involved. We did some airlifts before, some airdrops, and the people are running for it. And the Prime Minister is going to help us. They're very effective with that. You've done that before, and for many, they've done that for 100 years very well. So it's not very hard to do, actually.
So what are your thoughts? Is Trump evolving on this? Is this just ass covering, rear end covering, now that this is so undeniable, it's so on display? What do you think is happening here?
I think it's just Trump musing. I don't think it's really going to mean anything. Saying, there's all these barriers to whoever put those up, Hamas isn't controlling anything in the Gaza Strip. It's expressly Israel who designed everything, to include the very limited number of food processing points from, I think it was 100 to 4. And of course, like I said, they put them in the southern part for a very specific purpose as well. So this is 100% the Israeli plan. So first of all, to not even acknowledge that, how are you going to try to get food in? This is one thing that's it's just been exasperating to me from the beginning, when the food started to become a weapon, is this claim that, and first by Biden and then by Trump, that, we're trying to get this food in. We have a lot of food. We're just trying to get. What do you mean you're trying to? There's just either the food gets in or it doesn't. All we would have to do is give an order and say, open the damn gates, get the freaking food in there to all the points, and I don't want to hear any more complaint. That's what it would take. That's what the president of the United States has the power to do. He has the leverage. He could literally compel them and say, okay, fine, good luck with your war without any of our bombs. So let me know how that works out for you. You could do that. And it would happen within 12 hours, maybe faster. But when you instead do nothing except muse and talk, rambling about it, and take no action, then everything goes on and the starvation continues on, and we continue to facilitate that by providing the raw materials to do it.
Right. So what is the future for Israel looking like right now? Is Israel going to come out unscathed? Is this a turning point? Do you think Israel's going to lose allies? What do you think will happen moving forward?
I would have thought they were going to lose allies earlier than this, and they haven't, because I think a combination of, even in the local countries, in any target country, there's still this taboo against saying anything against Israel because of the Holocaust, the first Holocaust. I guess we have to start specifying which one now. And so I think it's just kind of been in the DNA that you just don't say anything about Israel. And that's wearing out now, for sure. I mean, you've just seen in the last week or 10 days, there's been a growing number of leaders of countries willing to say stuff out loud and willing to talk about recognizing a Palestinian state, et cetera. So there's been some move on it. And it's going in a bad direction for Israel. Professor Bartov, I asked him the same question, and he says, I think that they're marching towards Israel, towards a full-fledged apartheid state. This no ifs, ands, or buts about it. He worries about the next election coming up, that they may prevent Arab Israelis from voting and limit it to that, so that it further delegitimizes anybody who's not an Israeli Jew, et cetera. And he said that's obviously got some authoritarian consequences to that. But it's going to take something like the South African model, where enough countries finally stood up against it and took concerted action that actually harmed the state, and only then did they start doing the right thing or so. So I mean, that could be many, many years into the future. The only wild card in that is if the population in Palestine, in the Gaza Strip specifically, can survive that long. And the way the evidence is looking right now, I don't know that they can, because you could start getting large scale die-offs coming in the coming number of months. And some experts are saying it's already too late to stop it, even if all the food aid were turned on today, because of the cumulative damage that's done to the human systems. But so far, there's no evidence that the food is going to get turned on. So I have serious worries about that.
Yeah, and then there's this refeeding issue, which happened during, as you pointed out, the first Holocaust, which is when people who had been in the camps were given food, and it actually killed them because their bodies weren't able to digest it properly. And so there's going to have to be a lot of care. If the food is even allowed in, there's going to have to be a lot of overseeing. And I can't imagine that, given that Israel, whatever it does, I mean, it hasn't done a single thing out of any sense of responsibility or humanity. So I assume that they'll honestly do everything that they can to feed them, if they do, in a way that I don't trust them to not kill them while they feed them, honestly.
Yeah, and that's why we need somebody. I don't know if it's UNRWA or some other organization, somebody besides Israel, because you see what's happening when they're in charge of it.
And I want to ask you about the military dimension of this. How is the Israeli military doing? How is Hamas doing? What's your analysis of that?
I hate to keep going back to it, but it was so fresh. I like the way that Professor Bartov put that, because he said the war itself ended year and a half ago in terms of combat operations. Now it's just a methodical destruction of the infrastructure of the city. There's periodically you'll have a little clashes here and there where there's a Hamas guy may pop up out of his hole or something. They may have a clash, but there's really none of that. It's now just a systematic continuing of the destruction of the infrastructure of the city and the demolishing of the buildings, et cetera. So there is no war, even though that's the phrase the Israelis use. So I militarily, I agree with that. And that's been the case for quite a while, that it's just I can't use the term slaughter per se, because that militarily, they're not like just going out and killing a lot of people, but they are on a methodical demolition of the city. So that's probably the closest thing militarily. In terms of Hamas, they still exist in some number, but they're certainly not an effective military force. They're mainly hiding in the ruins or hiding in tunnels or hiding among the people. So there's not any concerted like offensive operations or counter strikes against the IDF that I can see in any numbers. So it's just a horrible situation. That's not, you can't really call it a war anymore.
Right. It's interesting. He says that Bartov says they're heading towards apartheid, because a lot of people say it already is apartheid.
Well, he specified a full-fledged apartheid.
Right, yeah.
So I think they've been kind of dancing around the edges, but pretty soon there won't be any of that.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to now shift topics. This is so important. We have a lot of other things to talk about, including Russia, Ukraine, Epstein, and the Tulsi Gabbard saga. So let's turn to that. And before turning to that, or in order to turn to that, I humbly invite you to join our Patreon at patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Again, that's patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. And if you do that, you'll be able to see the rest of the chat, where we do indeed talk about Epstein, Tulsi Gabbard's claims against Barack Obama, and Russia, Ukraine. So that's at patreon.com/the Katie Halper Show. As you guys requested, I wasn't going to do it anyway, but none of the other parts of today's show are going to be paywalled. I'm not going to paywall any of the stuff that you've already seen. The only thing that's paywalled is a very spicy segment with Daniel Davis, where he talks about Epstein, Tulsi, and Russia and Ukraine. Sorry, I just saw a really annoying comment, and I'm sick, so I got distracted by it. Sorry about that. But guys, this was an amazing show, and I'm so grateful to Dr. Feroze and Dr. Mark, and also to Murad and Ron Kuby for all the work that they do around immigrants' rights and civil rights. And also, I'm very grateful to Daniel Davis. I'm trying to think if I should engage with these. Yeah, if I made money off the Palestine struggle, I would have paywalled other parts of the show. Thanks. But the person who said that, I know I shouldn't engage. I know, Brad, right? Comments are like the sun. You shouldn't look at them. Will you come on and help me process for a second? I shouldn't engage, but I'm sick, so my immunity is low. But yeah. Don't put it. Why am I looking at these comments? Let me just block this person. This is not a democracy, by the way. Ban user and delete their comments. That's what I need to do. I need more. We have to have some more community mods because we have terrible people in today's chat. But all of you are great. Most of you are great.
It's not. I don't think that it's a very. That's not. I would say that's an exception, not the rule.
Oh, totally. You're right. No. They're infiltrators. They're Zion-Nazis. Yeah. This is a idiocracy. I like that.
We could have like a safe word or some sort of a symbol where I need to come on and kind of do something that distracts you.
Yeah.
So you don't look at that.
Yeah, you're right. Make no apology. I like that. Good job, Katie. Katie. Slow mode. We have to do slow mode. We have to make sure we turn on slow mode, and also only people can comment if they are
I would say not necessarily, again, like as a rule, but maybe if we have programs where generally speaking it's a safe assumption that it's going to attract more.
Yeah. Although I don't know how we can determine that. I'm not sure. Also, I'm not sure. Someone said there's a problem with the ads. I don't know what that means. Anyway.
Well, and unfortunately, we live in the reality that we live in, and so without knowing more about what the problem is with the ads.
Well, someone's saying it's like every 30 seconds, which should not be the case. So if that's true, then
we can look into that. And I mean, I'm sorry, the only other solution, unfortunately, is to have a subscription to YouTube so that you have no ads.
Right. But it's not. It's. I mean, obviously, if there's something. That's every 30 seconds. There's something wrong with it.
I'll look into that.
We'll look into that. Yeah. But yeah, and all the people who complain about paywalling, if you want to sponsor the show so I can pay people, or you want to pay my rent or Brad's rent,
that would be awesome.
You know where to reach me. Yeah,
that would be super cool.
Collaborate.
Yes, please.
We'd love to collaborate with you. Yeah. What else? No, that was a great show. And I'm really grateful to those guests. I mean, I'm so in awe of doctors in Gaza who are from there, who stay there. I mean, we should probably do a whole episode on the status of Dr. Abu Safiya, who is still in custody. I mean, he's not in custody, who's in jail being tortured. And the thing about him is that he's so incredibly brave, and he has a wife who is a citizen of another country, I think Tajikistan or something. So he had the ability to leave.
Wow.
And he stayed and is now tortured. And
I don't know. I think I was talking to my dad about this in the context of like emergency ambulance workers and whatnot, like the kind of person that could do that job. And it would be I don't know, and not become like completely desensitized and numb to that, seeing horrific things day in and day out. And I guess I would have the same thought about, people that are ER doctors and whatnot. Like, clearly they don't strike me as like sociopaths, and unfeeling, uncaring people. Like, furthest thing from that. So like, clearly they are caring, good people, but they've endured that, and and they still have that part of themselves, that their humanity. I don't know if I could do that.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah.
But yeah, this was an amazing show. Let me just read some of the super chats. And Brad, nice appearance from you. Nothingness became a YouTube member. Thanks, Nothingness. Andrew, thank you for your super chat. Thank you, Brian, as always, for your contribution. Intellectual.
And he changed his name.
Yeah, it's true.
Now it's B-Fred.
Yeah.
That could be his like DJ name.
He is a professor, and he writes, "Thanks for being a true humanitarian, Katie. I hope you don't get doxxed." Taran Hamadi Parker, thank you for the pounds. River Music writes, "Thank you, Katie, for having on these wonderful guests. Thank you so much." Firmware, thank you for your super sticker. And Roysha Malone from Ireland, thanks for the interesting chat and guests. Thank you so much. Love Ireland. Jacqueline Lake, the Zionist Project wants that the U.S. not progress too much with reconciliation with First Nations, but even if they do, it's something that ZP could maybe copycat 200 years in the future. Okay. Jim Conway.
Would ZP stand for Zionist Project?
I'm assuming, yeah.
Yeah.
Jim Conway, thanks for that. And Wadeworth. Wadeworth. Wow, thank you so much. So generous. Yeah, really appreciate that. Yeah, and this has been a great stream, and I want to thank everyone for coming by. Sorry, I paid attention to some stuff at the end. I got to be better about that. But I am sick, so I'm a little bit.
Yeah, your defenses are weakened.
Yeah,
exactly. And we're going up on hour 3, so you're right. I think you did a good job.
Thank you. And I pre-recorded an outro, but I wanted to touch base with everyone and also acknowledge the guests before, Daniel Davis. And it's pretty cool that, he's a lieutenant colonel. He is a follower of Jesus Christ. And so, I'm not neither of those things. I don't know if you may have gotten confused and thought I was both of those things. I'm not, but it's interesting that we do see really eye to eye on certain things. Yeah. Like that I see eye to eye with him on certain things that members of my extended family don't see eye to eye with me. And I'm blessed, though, that my parents and I see eye to eye.
And to me, like, one of the values, though, of talking with people like him and many others is, it seems to me like sometimes for some people, it's not necessarily what you're saying, but also who is saying it.
Yeah.
So like, even if it's stuff that you see eye to eye on, for some people, maybe it hits differently coming from that person.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and we will put in that we'll add to the description what you can text. Remember, I wrote it down in the chat. I don't remember. I'll write to Murad because I don't remember off the top of my head, and it's gonna be hard to find it. I should have texted it to you. I think I did text it to you. Anyway, we'll figure it out. We'll get to it though. And
it is text NYIC.
That's the New York Immigrant Coalition or something. Yeah. To
NYIC to 52886. 52886.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, yeah. Well, this has been great, and I gotta get my throat better. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Nate. Thank you, Phantom Fanta, and thank you out there, everyone watching and supporting the show. See you next week.
Okay, I'm down.